What is your best met the high school beach/bully as an adult story? I ran into a high school classmate a while back. I've posted this before but it bears repeating. A guy in high school just didn't like me and I him. We got into a big damn fight. He broke my nose and I knocked a couple of his teeth out, off campus. No police were involved, but about 10 years later I saw him sleeping on the street near where I worked. I woke him up and asked him what was going on. He told me about his life after high school. He knocked up his girlfriend. Her parents made them get married, divorce a year later. He got into drugs and ended up alienating everyone. I asked him if he was still using and he said no, he couldn't buy a dose anyway. I felt bad for him, so I asked if he'd like to stay in my guest house, a one-room cottage, set up like an efficiency apartment, for a while. He took me up on it and got a night's sleep in an actual bed for the first time in years. His words. I bought him some clothes and fed him for about a month until I found him a job with a contractor I was doing some work for. Long story short, it's been 6 years. He now owns a contracting business, has a wife and a new baby boy, and just bought the house down the street from me. Edit. Thanks for the gold. Edit. Hey guys, I'm really appreciative of all the support and I'd like to ask you all for one thing. Pay it forward. If you can help, do it. Even if it's a small favor, the repercussions of good deeds tends to ripple out. Let's make this a big splash. Edit. Due to some questions regarding the times I've posted this, I have posted this story 3 times on Reddit. I didn't do it for the karma, but it is nice, rather to inspire others, to maybe take a moment and help each other. My then fiancé took me out to dinner in my hometown, where we had our first date, to celebrate my new promotion. I recognized our waitress right away as the girl who had been mean to me in 6th and 7th grade, the only years we had classes together. She didn't seem to recognize me. I had gained a lot of weight and the restaurant was dark, so I let it go and treated her like any other waitress. When the bill came I asked my now husband how we should tip. She was a great waitress and deserved a generous tip like we usually do, but the urge to stiff her was there as payback. I decided to tip her generously and let the past go. But I did leave a note next to the tip. Here's to believing that people did grow up after high school. And I signed it class of 20. The next day I got on Facebook and she had sent me a message. She said she had recognized me, but I looked happy, so she said nothing, and she treated me like any other customer. Then she apologized for anything she might have done to me in school. It was a hard time for her, and she didn't like to think about who she was then. Some bullies do grow up, and I'm glad we both did the right thing. I grew up in Northern California, and every summer a bunch of people take to the water and go tubing down the Sacramento River. A popular stopping place mid-end of the route is Beacon Beach. It was here that I ran into this guy that was terrible in high school as I was docking my tube. Me, hey him, in a clear "Oh, I was awful to you, I should feign niceness" tone. "Hey, how's it going?" Me, through gritted teeth. "Awesome" him. Pause. "You faking hate me, don't you?" Me, surprised at his astute observation. "Yeah, I really do." Him, "What would make you feel better and us to be cool?" Me, "If you let me shoot you in the face with this super soaker." Him, "Okay." Me, "Really?" Him, "And then we'll be cool." Me, "Yeah, we'll totally be cool." And then he let me shoot him in the face with a super soaker in a constant stream until it ran out of water. It felt amazing. He knew he deserved it. He took his punishment. We both laughed and hugged. Worth it. When I was a kid, I was fat. I used to get picked on all the time by this kid at church named Rusty. He was about 5 years older than me, and every couple of weeks he would beat me up. I moved away when I was about 14, and thankfully, I didn't have to deal with him anymore. When I went to college, I decided to get my act together and get healthy. To that end, I started taking mixed martial arts. I did it for about 2 years, and lost about 40 pounds. When I graduated, I moved back to where I was from, and started looking for a new MMA gym. I went to the most reputable one, and who should be there but Rusty. It sounds too good to be true, but I swear to God, it happened. He hadn't changed a bit. The first thing he said to me was, "Finally trying to learn to defend yourself, huh?" I had called ahead, and the instructor knew my deal, and had arranged for me to come watch. I left my gear in the car. At the end of class, they do free rolling, jujitsu sparring. Rusty comes up to me, having no knowledge that I'm the least bit experienced, and starts begging the instructor to let him spar me so he can show me the ropes. After all, he's been in MMA for 3 months now, and he never misses a UFC pay-per-view. I went outside and changed. Long story short, we sparred, and I choked him out 3 times. Afterwards, I signed up for classes. He grabbed his bag, left, and never came back. This is my favorite story out of everything that has happened in my life thus far. I'm the only person I know that got to beat up my childhood bully as an adult. Sorry if this seems sparse. I'm on mobile. Edit. Holy crap. I made this post this afternoon and get back to my computer to see this totally blow up. Thanks a lot for the encouragement everyone, and thanks for the Reddit gold. Ours was extremely smart and very athletic. He was an incredible wrestler and undefeated throughout high school. I saw him at a party at a friend's house randomly, and we caught eyes a few times, and eventually we just approached each other and said hello, exchanged bro hugs. Mind you, we hardly talked. The only time we really did was when I told him to stop picking on someone and told me he would kick my ass instead. He was a lovely guy. Anyway, he hadn't changed one bit. He tried to pick fights with people throughout the night and kept looking at me while he was in yelling matches with people. So I kept getting in between him and the other person, telling them both to calm down. This happened a few times until it started getting a little physical, and he looked at me again. So I stood up and he tried to push the guy one more time. So I grabbed him by his shoulders and started pushing him back, telling him to cool it, and I thought, what the fuck am I doing? He is an angry wrestler that can take me down. Once I got him back a ways and told him to knock it off, he just looked at me and said, you know what I could do to that guy, but I don't want to. Please, stop me. It was the saddest hold me back bro moment I have ever been a part of. It was odd that he kept looking for me to stop his fights, but I was glad I was that guy for a bit. I own my own gym and have for a few years now. I received a message one day from a familiar looking name on the business Facebook page from a woman asking to come try us out. We set it up. She comes in for an introduction. She's a very large and out of shape woman at this point. After about 5 minutes of working with her, it hits me that this lady used to be about half her current size and was an absolute B underscore in her heyday. I decided not to bring it up to her as she appeared to be struggling in life and came to us in a time of need, and I took it, as I do with all of my clients, as a cry for help. Not to mention, I'm a grown man now, and that seemed pretty silly and insignificant in life today. Months later, during one of the classes, I noticed her struggling real hard, so I go over to offer some encouragement. As I lean down to say something to her, I notice she's crying faintly to herself. She looks up at me and quietly says, sorry for how nasty I was to you years ago, and thank you for doing this for me. Turns out an old mutual friend told her about my place and she recognized me as the owner and came to me on purpose. No, not a story of revenge or attribution, but she reached out to someone she was terrible to, and today she's repurposed, and I find it to be quite inspiring. I've got two. I was picked on a lot. About 10 years ago I got a temporary job at Kroger. It was just stocking shelves, and I had another restaurant job lined up, but needed something for about 2 months. While I went through a lengthy hiring process there, spoiler, I wound up getting an even better job elsewhere, and wound up never taking that. So I go to get my check on my first payday at Kroger and find out the manager at the front is one of the guys who used to bully the shit out of me in high school. He made small talk for a minute. Hey, how you been? Good to see you, he clearly remembered. Once everyone walked away, he leaned in and said, hey, deprecated zero. I'm really sorry for all the shit I did to you in school. I was a stupid as whole kid. I smiled, held out my hand, thanked him and told him it's all in the past. That was really cool. The other is less cool, but hilarious to me. This girl was the prom queen, basically, the stereotypical mean girl dating the football player. My opinion of her was always that she was just spoiled, worthless, and dumb. I don't usually take joy in other people's misfortune, but I felt schadenfreude in unparalleled amounts the day I walked into Buffalo Wild Wings and saw her standing behind the counter. This is maybe 10 years out of high school. She looks exactly the same. Put on some weight, maybe, but hair still done the same. Still looks like she got a featuring kid to do her makeup, so on. You can tell at a glance that she's never mentally moved past 8th grade. I asked how she'd been, tried to politely talk to her, because hey, I want people to do well. She was a beach, was like, ooh, you're deprecated 0. I just raised my eyebrows at her and let it go. Long story short, her boss was my roommate. I asked him about her, single mother, just got kicked out of her mom's house. He just hired her like 2 weeks earlier. He confronted her about talking down to customers and wound up firing her. Felt like justice. I was never really picked on in high school, besides the fact that I was years behind everyone in growth. Late bloomer, I guess you could say I was part of the cool people clique. Although I was generally nice to everyone, I did let my popularity go to my head a few times and would treat a few guys in some of my classes like they were my minions or servants. As I grew up as a person, I realized how much of a faking tool I was and felt terrible about it for years. It just so happens that 2 of the main guys I picked on were gay and are now life partners with each other. I instantly recognized them coming at an expensive place I was taking my girlfriend out to eat for our anniversary. They didn't make reservations and there was at least hour wait. We had just been seated, but I instantly knew this was my time to say I was sorry. So after a few minutes of explaining to my girlfriend why I needed to do this, I called them over, told them to take our seats and how sorry I was for being a dickbag to them in high school, wished them luck, and paid for their dinner and dessert. Me and my girlfriend decided to get some fast food and go for a picnic. 2 weeks later I got a message from both of them saying that was the nicest thing anyone has ever done for them and they forgive me for all the times I treated them like shit. I live in the deep south, where being gay is heavily unaccepted. 2 months after that I got a wedding invite. One of the coolest weddings I have ever been to, and so glad that's how it all played out. Kendall was the little Ashet bully. His older brother Adrian was my friend. Kendall made my life in high school a living hell. Lots of teasing and stuff. He beat the crap out of me in the gym lockers one winter, took my clothes, and left me to walk home naked. But Adrian and I joined the army together. Years later, Adrian was in my unit, different platoon, and was killed in Iraq. I volunteered to fly with his body back home for his family. Kendall never showed up, not even to the funeral. I heard that he was shacked up with some coke-ho downtown, so I went over there, kicked in the door, dragged Kendall out by his hair, and pushed and kicked and dragged him the 2.5 miles to the cemetery, where I had buried his brother that morning, berating him on how horrible of a person he was. Kendall was a bloody mess by the time we got to his brother's grave. I beat the ungodly shit out of him, right on the freshly turned dirt, then I left him there. A year later, on the anniversary of Adrian's death, I returned to his grave. Kendall was waiting on me. He was cleaned up and sober and apologized to me incessantly. After lunch, he asked me to take him down to the recruiter's office to join up and make his brother proud. This was one of the greatest moments in my life. My dad is a very large man. We're talking 6 feet 7 inches 300 pounds big. He would always tell me this story to cheer me up when girls would be bitches to me. He was pretty chubby in high school, so he played football and was good at it, but just really loved playing basketball. So his freshman year he tried out for the team and didn't make it. The coach, who was a history teacher at the school, stated his weight as an issue. Fair enough, he worked hard to lose some weight over the summer, blah blah blah. Enter sophomore year, ends up having the coach as his history teacher. Great, he thinks. He can be a good student and hopefully get on the team. Wrong. This adult man decided to call my father names related to his weight and harass him in front of the class. Not cool, but my dad was too proud and never said anything. Ended up making varsity his sophomore year because of a coaching change. Fast forward about 5 years, my dad was working as a bouncer at a bar in a nearby town to where he went to school. It was a regular night when who walks in? Jackass history teacher. Perfect. He thinks I'll let it go, be professional. until he recognizes my dad as a chubby kid who was a coward. My dad looks at him and says, "Sir, I think you've had too much to drink. It's time for you to go home." The coach is saying, "No, I'm fine etc. My dad grabs him by his shirt and says, "No. It's time for you to step outside. You have had too much to drink." The coach decides to swing at my dad, and that's when he loses it. He states, "This is for all the kids you've called fat, you piece of shit," and proceeds to beat the tar out of him. A long story, I know, but my favorite by far. My dad and his old bouncer friends always tell it when they got together too. Our revenge. Edit grammar and noting that my dad wasn't 6 feet 7 inches as a freshman, but more like 6 feet 3 inches. Still tall though. I definitely didn't take the high road here, but it was fantastic. When I was bouncing, I saw my ex-bully walk into my bar. This guy made my high school life hell through every method except violence. I was bigger than him by a fair margin. I knew he lived a couple towns over. This was small town New Zealand after all. I also knew he was driving. I looked for his car, and it was parked in a towaway area. I gleefully called the company who handles this for us, and they towed it. He was in the pub at the time. He was none the wiser. I also got one of our glasses to follow him around and take his glass every time he put it down for more than 5 seconds. It was pretty busy that night and he wasn't overly bright, so again he was none the wiser. After a few hours of this, he came outside for a smoke where it was pouring rain and afterwards turned around to go back inside. I blocked his way and he tried to shove past me. I told him he was acting aggressively and I wouldn't be letting him back in. He started shouting that he'd left his wallet inside. I told him that if he'd thought of that before trying to shove past me, maybe I would have gone to get it for him. At this point, in his eyes, I stopped being a bouncer and was again the scared little 17-year-old from 7 years earlier. He took a swing at me, missed, and fell over in the gutter. He wasn't drunk. It was just that the ground was wet and he slipped. We had a couple of cops who used to come in for a few drinks off duty every now and again, and they happened to be smokers. They saw what had happened and called their buddy who was on duty, and he swung by, picked this jerk up, and threw him in the drunk tank. I'm not proud of my feelings about this, but seeing the guy who destroyed high school for me getting thrown into the drunk tank after being ripped off at a pub, getting humiliated while trying to look like the big man, being sober enough to be hugely frustrated over this whole thing, and knowing that when he gets out of the drunk tank in the morning, his car won't be where he'd left it made me feel great. I never messed with him again after that. I felt we were even. At the tender age of 14, and standing a bit over 5 feet tall, I was sent to boarding school. I had braces, a body perm, and weighed not more than 70 pounds. About as scared as a rabbit in a thunderstorm, I kept my head low and tried to stay under the radar. A group of older girls somehow noticed me anyhow and began harassing me, at first in small ways such as making snide remarks, but quickly escalating to physical abuse. Walking back to the girls' dorm after class, my heart rate would increase as I planned out my route through the lobby and up the stairs to my room. Much of the time, I'd get intercepted, and if nobody else was around, pinned to the ground and given sailor taps while being laughed at. One of the girls in particular seemed to really have it out for me, and long after the others lost interest, she'd still openly make fun of me and corner me at every opportunity for a bit of physical abuse. I'd lie in my bed at night conjuring all sorts of scenarios in which I could humiliate her. It was all for naught, though, as morning would come, and I'd still be the nerdy little kid who'd be wise not to try anything. She'd still be the big boobed popular girl who walked around pulling a wake of disciples in her path. Many years later, now standing well over 6 feet tall, and known within my circle of business as an attractive woman who was not to be messed with, I scheduled a lunch meeting with a few possible vendors, to be located at the shopping mall I was helping develop. Seated with representatives from Radio Shack, Sears, and a few others, our waitress approached the table. She was a wreck of a woman, crispy fried bleached blonde hair, pock-marked complexion, and cheap clothing stretched over a body several pounds too large for it. As she fumbled around for a pen in her apron, our eyes met, and it would be difficult to describe what was exchanged wordlessly as we recognized each other. The tables had turned dramatically. Vengeance was mine. I said it was nice to see her after all these years, and that I couldn't think of anyone I'd be happier to have as my server. The meeting went well, table service was impeccable, and I left a tip equal to our tab for the meal. Haven't seen her since, but now when I think of her I get all warm and tingly with the deliciousness of winning. For those of you asking what sailor taps are, I also googled it to no avail, and have to believe that we made the term up. Can't find it anywhere. We use that phrase to describe someone pinning you down and rapping repeatedly on your sternum using their knuckles. Hurt like a beach and left my chest violently discolored and painful for days after. /u/Blackadelac explains history of the term. When somebody receives a warfare designator in the Navy, they get a little metal warfare device decoration pinned to their uniform at the collarbone level. It's a hush-hush Navy tradition for people to slap or punch the new pin on the person's chest throughout the day and say congratulations. The little metal spikes that attach the pin to the uniform are driven into the receiving party's collarbone. In today's Navy they call it tacking on the pin. The older term that moved to the civilian world is sailor tap. TLDR, sailors like amuse themselves by punching each other's metallic warfare decorations into each other's chests. Sailor tap. And /u/enjoy tells how he used it. What you described as sailor taps is what I was taught in the military to check if someone was faking being dead/unconscious/asleep. That shit hurts, and you gotta be a pro to not respond to it. I was embarrassed by an older boy when I was in 7th grade. He thought I had been throwing sunflower seed at him at lunch. He calmly got up with his tray of pizza and french fries with ketchup and threw it in my face. I ran to the bathroom as 200 kids laughed at me. Later, when we were both sat down in the principal's office, I actually broke down and cried when asked to explain what had happened. He kid laughed and later told his friends. It took a good couple years before people stopped picking on me about this. Worst moment of my entire school career. Flash forward a decade. I'm at an outdoor concert in a park. I see that faking kid again, only now we are both grown up. He's not so big anymore. I felt a drunken rage rise in me. I walked over to him. My plan was to sucker punch him in the side of the head and walk away. But then I caught sight of his sister. She recognized me and said hey. We all ended up talking and catching up. I got the dude work with my brother. I guess he was kind of broke. His sister thought that was kind of cool of me. We ended up dating for about 6 months. I'd like to say I felt immense satisfaction every time I slipped my penis inside her, not only because I was getting laid, but because it was my school bully's sister. I didn't, though. I knew we had changed, and I realized that I just wasn't angry anymore. Growing up, my wife had a cat that would go everywhere with her. It would ride on the handlebars of her bike and in her backpack. The two were inseparable. Then one day the cat disappeared. A couple days later in school a kid came up to her and told my wife he'd shot the cat with his bow. The cat screamed and screamed, he said, and he laughed. Broke my wife's heart. She still doesn't know where/if the cat is buried. Fast forward a couple years later, the bully has found God and is a preacher. My wife shows up to one of his services, stands up in the middle of his sermon, and asks if he remembers how he tortured her cat when she was a little girl. Everyone is speechless. The bully stammers. My wife tells everyone that the man standing before them, preaching about love and kindness, murdered her favorite pet and made her childhood a living hell. Edit 1. From what she describes, he looked mortified and stammered and started tearing up. He may have just been embarrassed or truly apologetic, we don't know. But my wife isn't one to forgive and forget so easily, believe me, especially when it comes to an event that still haunts her. She waited for him to respond, but he remained silent and just sort of helplessly shook his head, mouth agape. My wife kind of nodded and left it at that. She walked out, but is fairly certain he didn't finish his sermon that day. I don't know if she's run across him since, but she says that from the look of terror in his eyes she'd gotten her point across. She feels a little better, but not knowing exactly what happened to that cat still tears at her. Edit 2. Thanks for the gold. Posting from Alien Blue, so hopefully this replies in the right spot. Don't want to leave you all hanging. He'll also ask her when she gets home if he ever apologized. He may have written her a letter. I'll update. Update texted my wife explaining that the internet loves her but demands to know if the guy who killed her cat ever apologized. She says he did reach out to her via Facebook to apologize after the church incident. He said he regrets what he did. Apparently after killing the cat, he would taunt my wife relentlessly. He told her he shot it with a bow, then buried it while it was still screaming. I didn't know that part. So, he did apologize and say that he's changed. My wife says she thanked him for his apology, but that she did not forgive him, nor would she ever forgive him. She has moved on and is happy, but she would never forget the pain he caused her. And she is happy he supposedly changed, but she hopes his actions continue to haunt him and serve as a reminder that no matter how good and decent he may be today, he's still the monster in her nightmares. Moved to a new school in 7th grade and was doing fine making friends, good grades. Then somehow ran afoul of this bigger kid. He'd been held back a few times. Typical bully, pushed little kids into lockers, loved to torment girls, and ran with a pack of acolytes who adored and aped him. In Texas at the time, if a kid didn't like you, he called you out, challenged you to a fight after school. Well, Zed calls me out one day because I was a faggot from New York. Clueless me moved there from said New York, where people are civilized. I said, sure, okay. A few days later, in front of his acolytes and a small group of my friends, he proceeds to beat the shit out of me. It was 7th grade, so the damage wasn't excessive, mostly to my pride. Spent the rest of middle school known as one of the guys Zed beat the shit out of. Fast forward about 7 years, home from college, and going to the grocery store for mom. Who should I see bagging my goodies but Zed? Taking a look at him, I see a horrible scar running from the top of his head down around the back of his skull and neck, and under his shirt. His face lights up when he sees me, and he says, in slightly slurred speech, "Hey, didn't we go to school together? We are friends from school, right?" He walks with me out to the parking lot, and as we walk I learn that he had been hit by a car in high school while biking home one day. Accident required a half dozen surgeries and had left Zed mentally impaired and a completely different person. He put my stuff in the car, shook my hand for a good 30 seconds, and kept asking me to come back and see me sometime. I had hated few people in my life to that point, and no one more than him. Almost cried driving home. I felt so bad for him and disgusted with myself for my previous hatred. One of mine was this kid named Patrick. One incident led to 2 of my ribs being broken when he jumped on my chest with his knees. Another resulted in a broken eye socket after being kicked in the face by him and 2 of his friends. Eventually I moved in with my father and didn't see any of my old bullies again except for a few. Some have been relatively nice and some are sheetheads. During high school I filled out a bunch and took some martial arts classes, taekwondo. I was always a larger kid, but too timid to fight back, but martial arts helped me overcome that. Fast forward to a year or 2 after high school and I go over to visit my mother. She had moved in with a real sheethead who was into God knows what. And guess who's there? Patrick. He's now almost a foot shorter than me, skinny as a middle school girl, and was undoubtedly on meth. I later found out he also did heroin and a myriad of other drugs. We end up talking, and I tell him about how I have sinus trouble because of the beating I got from him and his friends. He laughed. I looked around at my younger brother, who had got very skinny from not eating, and sister, the environment they were in, and right then I made a decision. I turned to my mother and said, I don't give a shit if this is the kind of people you want to be around, indicating the piece of sheet next to me, but we are leaving. So I piled my siblings in my car and brought them home with me. They shortly moved in with my father officially and have been much better off since. Patrick made a comment about me disrespecting him and my mother, and I told him he had no respect for himself obviously, so who is he to talk like that? He went to hit me and I just stared at him. He dropped his fist quick after I stared him down for what felt like an hour. TLDR, met middle school bully, he's a meth head, was living with my mother, took my siblings, and left after verbally sparring with him. Feels good, man. Edit. Wow, this got a lot more calmer than I thought. Didn't have time to write this up earlier, but to clear a few things up. He didn't have sex with my mother. I don't think. He was basically just there all the time like drugs addicts are wont to do. My mother was living and faking her boyfriend at the time, whose house it actually was. And the thought of snapping him like a twig did occur to me, but that paled in comparison to what he was doing to himself. If he didn't clean his ways up by now, he's likely dead or in prison getting his rap daily. Beating the shit out of him wouldn't have made me feel any better. Plus it's a lot easier on the knuckles. Background: I was bullied a lot in middle school and, for unrelated reasons, ended up going to a different high school from most of my classmates and obviously didn't keep in touch. I was back home from college for Christmas a year or two ago and was at the mall with my little sister and my fiance. I recognized a girl from my middle school across the food court, but we had never been friends, so I simply made a mental note that she was there and went back to eating. A few moments later my fiance and sister both got up to use the restroom, and I was by myself. The girl gets up, comes over, makes nice for half a second, "Oh hi, how are you? Haven't seen you in forever, blah blah," and then immediately transitions into how I look pathetic and desperate sitting by myself, and how it's no wonder the people I was with left. I'm completely taken aback, and it takes me a moment to form words. I hadn't seen this girl in 6 or 7 years, and hadn't said more than 5 words to her. I picked up my purse, stood up from my table, and said, "We are grown-ups now," in the most condescending tone I could manage through my surprise. I wanted to say something about how she needed to stop acting like a child, or how there were no teachers around to stop me from leaving, but in that moment I had too many thoughts and couldn't express them all at once eloquently, so I just left. I think, or at least hope, she got the message. I was working in a video rental store in Houston, circa 1989, about 2 years after I graduated high school. In comes a girl that had always been awful to me from 10th grade to graduation. She would cross a room just to say something mean, and I had no history with this girl at all. I had never actually said a word to her. All our exchanges were just her saying something mean to me. I didn't even know her last name. I must have reminded her of someone. She comes into the store and sheepishly said that she wanted 3 dirty movies. She didn't seem to remember me. She said her best friend was getting married and she wanted some dirty movies for the bachelorette party. The shop had a small adult room that you had to access by coming behind the counter, but she didn't want to go in there. She asked me to select 3 films. She was squirming with embarrassment as I tried to find out what she was backquote into and kind of acted like I thought the films were for her and her alone. She said, backquote, "Just grab 3 backquote good ones, I don't care." So I selected 3 all lesbian borns, and she slunk out with them. I would have loved to see the look on their faces when they popped those tapes in. She returned them through the night drop, so she wouldn't have to look anyone in the eye when she brought them back. She rented on her parents' account. I sent a notice through the mail to her parents that backquote Mona's 3-way cunt party had been returned damaged, and they owed us $30. Probably doomed as this thread is large, but I had an experience with an old grade school bully that made me very happy. Was sitting at my house playing video games one day, about a year out of high school, when I heard a knock at my front door. I open it to see, I'll call him Jim, standing on my front porch. He said hello and then immediately just launched into a lengthy apology. He felt horrible for mistreating me and many other nerdy kids back in school. We were in classes together from about 3rd grade through junior year. I was one of the people he had decided to personally track down and speak with. Turns out, he had made some bad mistakes after graduating and spent about 9 months in prison. It was a wake-up call for him. He was sober and really trying to get his life in order. He gave me his phone number and said that I ever felt like getting together, I should give him a call. I called him later that week on a whim, and we ended up becoming good friends for the next 3 years. Unfortunately, he began to slip. I walked into his house as he was doing meth in the living room. I hung out a handful of times after that, but saw him doing worse and worse. Meth was one of the triggers for the violent behavior that got Jim into prison initially. I did not want to see a repeat. So, I quietly took my leave. I haven't spoken with him since. I hope he's doing well. Good guy, at heart. This girl at college tried to get me kicked out for bullying her. My college was attached to the secondary school, UK, so we'd been at school together for 7 years, though I'd actually actively been staying out of her way as I knew she didn't like me. Fast forward a few months and I walk into our A-level results day with an acceptance letter from my first choice university in my pocket, which this bitch had spent the last year telling me I was too stupid to get into. She missed both her first and second choices and sat crying on the phone trying to find a university to take her. 4 years later I have my degree and I moved back to a town near where my family lives to work as a manager in a busy and successful restaurant. She comes in with a work party and sneers when she sees me waiting tables. Her face when they ask me for the manager to complain about me, for no reason I might add, was priceless. That would be me. How can I help? Turns out she works as a coffee slave in a cafe in the local, crappy, shopping center, and last time I walked past I saw she'd stolen some of my business ideas and passed them off under her name. She still comes to the restaurant occasionally, but I'll let my second in command deal with her table as I can't promise to be impartial. I even make sure I go nowhere near their food or drinks, so there's no room for her to complain. It's a small victory sure, but it makes me feel a bit vindicated. I had a teacher in grade 12 for modern Western history. The class was incredibly boring as a result of her teaching style and I didn't pay much attention during the year. I was sporting a solid D in the class and Mrs. Censored would make reference to me being a dullard continuously. On many occasions over the year people would laugh at me as a result of a comment she made. At the time I didn't think she was trying to be vindictive, just trying to jeer me into doing better in the class. Nonetheless I'm sure it did have some impact on my self-esteem. Fast forward 8 years I'm running a college pro painting franchise, standing in a customer's driveway getting supplies out of the back of my wicked awesome Chevy Lumina minivan. Mrs. Censored walks by, recognizes me and says, "Oh, I'm so glad you got a job. You know, I could have told you were going to go into a manual labor trade. You were never really focused," in as flat a tone as I could. I got to tell her that not only am I running this franchise that employed 12 people that summer, but that I'm doing it while still a full-time student getting my BCom. The best satisfaction I have ever had, because it didn't have to be confrontational, but I definition got to set her straight. Fast forward another 7 years and I'm running an internet advertising business. Her son applies for the job. He was underqualified, but during the interview we started talking about his mom, not in a bad way. Turns out she is way harder on him than she ever was to me, constantly berating him because he wasn't very studious and dropped out of university. I gave him the job and he is now our best employee. I see Mrs. Censored from time to time, never spoken about how she made my life hell my last year of high school, but I now have the satisfaction of defying expectations of me and her son while being his biggest benefactor. Edit. Grammar. Came late to the game so nobody will probably see it, but here it goes anyway. There was a freakishly large guy who walked the same way home as me in high school and used to mercilessly push me and say degrading things. My older brother was a monster and would stop him if he was ever there, but that rarely happened. Fast forward 4 years after graduation. I'm a successful casino supervisor and he is working at Big 5 in the sporting goods department. I of course held no hard feelings, understanding he had a shitty life and he was just acting out bad stuff and feelings that he had from growing up. Apparently he did not feel the same way and advised a man as he handed him a rifle it was not okay to point it at anybody in the store except for me. He doubled down and told him the rifle was 10% off if the rifle was pointed at me. I looked at him and asked him if he understood what he was doing. He just smiled threateningly at me. At this point I was besides myself and couldn't believe he would make such a massive and illegal mistake. I went to the front and called the manager. I explained the situation and told him that I was calling the police immediately and contacting a lawyer unless said employee was fired on the spot and escorted from the store. When the manager looked into it, the guy wasn't even smart enough to lie. He just said it had been a joke and I was being a beach. The customer backed me up too. I told him we could avoid lawsuits and cops, just fire him and I would drop it. I got to watch with immense satisfaction as they escorted him from the premises about 20 minutes after the manager agreed, and the look of glee on my face just pushed his anger further. I had been willing to drop it, but that win was one of the best feelings of my whole life. TLDR, got a dude who bullied me in high school fired on the spot from his job and removed from the store for asking a customer to point a gun at me. Edited, formatting and grammar. There was this girl who used to be a huge bitch to me in middle school. Always used to physically push me into the walls in the hallways, call me ugly, make fun of me for not having any friends. It was extra obnoxious because I'm a guy, so this then led to being made fun of by the guys, which in turn spurred her on. And I couldn't hit her back or anything because that would turn public opinion against me. Anyway, we went to the same high school and things sort of wound down. She tried to carry on for a bit, but no one else found it funny, so she decided to stick to whispering ugly and loner when we passed each other in the hallways. It was only when other people were around though. Turns out we lived quite close to each other, and the couple times we walked past each other in the street she looked terrified, which I remember making my day each time. Fast forward nearly a decade, I'm now 24. A few months ago I was buying some food, and she was on the registers. She looked pretty worn down, recognized me, smiled and asked how things have been, like we're old friends. I was nice to her, we had a chat, then as I was leaving I stopped, turned back and said, paraphrasing, "It's weird, when you're a kid everything's so black and white, people who are assholes to you got built up in your mind, until they're these monsters who want nothing but to ruin your life. Then when you grow up you realize they're just humans like you, and it kind of makes everything that happened feel so hollow, because to not forgive the past makes you a guy who holds grudges against children." She just smiled at me weakly with sad eyes, and I went home and cried like a beach. This is very long TLDR. High school bully ends up crying alone in a corner at 5-year high school reunion because more guys paid attention to me than to her at said reunion. I went to boarding prep school and there was this one girl, we'll call her D, who was always a rude bitch. My first interaction with her was when I came back to my room in the second week of school my freshman year and found her ranting about my clothes with my roommate. I overheard them before I walked in to find her cutting up a sweater of mine. She said she was doing my roommate a favor so she wouldn't have to look at that sweater again. At this point, I had never even seen her before. I was shocked and confused and didn't say anything. Over the course of high school I had a lot of interactions with D, all of which sucked. They ranged from her cornering me because she was under the impression I was dating a new hot junior, I was dating his roommate, X, and he and I were just friends. He had a girlfriend back home with the same name as me and told me I should dump him because I wasn't good enough for him and he should be with someone hotter. She would always have something mean to say whenever we passed each other in the hallway. She was very proud of her Italian heritage and screamed at me in front of a group of 10 or so people because I had the audacity to say that I was half Italian, more than her. She didn't believe me because my last name wasn't Italian like hers. Hello, it's on my mother's side? Whatever. She said I wasn't good enough to be Italian. While I was good at hockey, she was on the varsity team and made sure I didn't join by making me feel very unwelcome. Even though the coach asked me each year to please try out because he liked what he saw of me on JV. The list of stupid shit goes on and on. I was pretty shy at this time and already had fairly low self-esteem, so her attempts to make me feel like shit worked more often than not. Fast forward 5 years, and I'm gearing up for our big reunion. It's a weekend-long event full of lobster and open bar and something you look forward to from your freshman year of high school. Leading up to reunion weekend, I was nervous. My mom gave me the advice to think of the people I went to high school with as new people, as they will have grown up, and it's not fair to judge people by who they were in high school. A small group got together a few weeks before reunion weekend and D happened to be there as well. I remembered what my mom had told me, so when D came up to say hi, I was pleasantly surprised and optimistic about where the conversation would go. She started out nice enough but then said, "I heard you live with X, but I know that can't be true, because you are not cool enough to even be friends with X, and you didn't even know him at school as you remember. X and I dated back in high school, which was pretty common knowledge. Ex and I had remained friends and even became roommates post college. I reminded her of such, and she just walked away. When reunion came around, I warned my boyfriend to stay away from D. I just wanted to have a good time, and if we avoided her, we would have a blast. My boyfriend didn't believe that someone could be so awful, so the first thing he does when I point her out to him is walk right up to her. She's having a conversation with another girl, and he waits politely to join in. D turns her back to him and continues talking. After a few minutes, he says excuse me and introduces himself as Ben. She looks at him with disgust and says, "You're Jess Mess 86's boyfriend, right?" And he replies in the affirmative. She then responds with, "That's all I need to know," and turns her back once again to him. He comes back laughing and telling me I was right. Reunion was fun despite her presence. I managed to avoid her. I have to admit that my confidence has soared post high school and that a lot of guys find that attractive. As the second night was winding down, I found myself in a circle of guys from my class who were all very curious about my life and very flirtatious. Among these guys were D's ex-boyfriend, whom she had stayed with all through college and had recently broken up, and the guy she had declared as hers for the weekend. Even though I had a boyfriend, they were all much more interested in talking to me than her. At one point I saw her literally crying, drunk in a corner by herself. The final day of the reunion, my boyfriend and I came to the dining hall for breakfast. We sat down at the table for our class and D was there looking worse for wear. We ignored her, and he had the whole table laughing at his jokes and stories. I looked up to see that she was the only one not laughing. Felt good to see her so miserable from her own doing, and to watch the misery increase as she saw how happy I was, and how awesome my boyfriend was, and how the guys would have rather hung out with me than her. 10-year reunion is coming up next year and I can't wait. 2 stories. Wallow text. 1. Had a group of guys torment me all through junior and senior high school. I was a nerd, but a weird nerd in the sense that I was very academic, and it was my main pursuit, but I was fairly athletic. I played football and wrestled at school. Outside of school I was studying martial arts. I had been training 4 years kung fu, kempo, boxing, kickboxing, a little aikido, etc. but never made a big deal of it because one sifu told me that it's something for me to improve myself and take care of myself should I need to. I should only let other PPL know as a last case scenario, and even then only at the blunt end of my fist. These guys would try to push PPL around at parties, etc. They tried to fight me several times and I usually got out of it. Once I floored 2 of them at a party in front of a lot of PPL. One shot KO'd one and threw the other on his head and fod. I wasn't gonna fight 10 guys. As an adult years later, I'm getting changed for class, and one of the guys walked into the change room. It was the one I flipped. He was new student for his first class. I remember the feelings creep up my spine. What the fuck was this asshole doing here? But it had been a long time. We were both in our early 20s. Try to make like I didn't see him on the way to the mat. Doing a little light warming up on the mat, he comes out, uncomfortable, looking for where he should go and what he should do, as many new students do. He sees me and comes over. "Hi, Icefama. I thought that was you. How have you been?" We chatted for a bit. He lost track of everyone after high school. Said he'd grown up a lot and was acting like a pretty chill guy. Was always interested in training, etc. Said he was glad he was getting his life together because he was a giant douche until about 2 years after high school. I laughed. First class went well. In the locker room, after he asked how long I'd been doing this for and commented on the darker belt around my waist, I told him about my time in that style and others. He said, "So that night at the party at X's house, you could have beat my ass worse than you did." Told him that the training wasn't really about that and why I trained. I didn't like fighting, but could defend myself if he needed to. Said that was the first wake up call he had. He and his friends thought they were awesome untouchable gangster wannabes in high school and had no idea about real life. He didn't exactly apologize, but I could tell he knew what he was and what he did back then. He trained there for about 2 years more until he moved. Was a much better guy, too. Was tormented by a rather cute girl in high school. She stole my stuff. She threw things at me. She put rubber cement in my hair. Who the fuck puts rubber cement in someone's hair? She used to heckle me with her friends in the hallway and at social outings we both happened to be at. She always made an effort to do or say things to me. I thought she was a huge bitch. Again, I was the nerdy guy that happened to play sports, so outside of my 3 to 4 friends at school, all my social circle was from outside of school. In university years later, on summer break at a party, she was there. Apparently she went to another school out of town. Didn't know, didn't care. I was single at the time and everyone is having fun. This faking bitch comes up and says hi. I've always been polite, so I say hi back. She keeps talking to me. After a few minutes I stop and ask her, why are you being so nice to me? She looked a little flabbergasted. What do you mean? She always cheated on me every chance she got in high school and now she seems so nice. Has being an undergrad made you grow up a little? She says. Well, this is embarrassing. Okay, come with me. She grabs my hand and leads me outside. I make a joke about if I saw rubber cement she was in deep shit. My friends are all like, what the fuck, because I'm not known for being rude. She takes me outside to a bench with no one nearby and she sits me down. It was a gorgeous night outside. She says that she knows some of the jokes she pulled on my were a little bit rude / uncalled for. I say no shit. She did it, all of it, every little thing, because she had a huge crush on me. For the first time all night I'm speechless. She asks, do you see what I mean? My response, how the fuck does that work? She explains that she liked me because I was a nice guy, a little different, really smart, in good shape and cute. My mind is still blown. So what about the rubber cement in the hair and being nasty? How did that factor in? She admitted that she didn't know what to do, and she also didn't want another one of her friends talking to me. Apparently she was interested as well, so the best way was to do stuff to me to keep my attention on her, while bad-mouthing me to her friends, so they wouldn't be interested. I should qualify. I never had a girlfriend until after high school. I had no game and no clue. University was much better, and I also started figuring things out a bit. I asked, so you're the reason I didn't get laid until after high school? She said she was sorry and how it was all really dumb. We ended up talking for hours and laughing about it in retrospect. I also realized there were some signs I missed. It was getting later and we kept talking. I wrapped her in my jacket and we talked for hours more. She moves close and kisses me. We end up making out on the bench for a long time. Missed most of the party. We ended up having a summer fling for a few weeks until she went back to school. TLDR. Story 1. Met a bully from high school on his first day at a martial arts class where I'd been training for years. Story 2. Run into high school beach that put rubber cement in my hair at a summer party in university. Things turn unexpectedly. Mind blown. I had a fantastic occurrence of this. My dad was in the RAF when I was growing up, which resulted in a lot of moving around and changing schools as we went. I was always the new kid. I moved schools from Wales to England when I was about 13 and ended up being put into an absolutely awful social group who made it their personal mission to ruin my life on a daily basis. As a result of this, I reclused and became a hardcore geek and began teaching myself 3D art in the evenings after school as a bit of an escape. As school progressed and the bullying got worse, my 3D art skills became better and better and that became my passion. I left school at 16 after failing my GCSEs due to spending too much time doing 3D art and not enough time revising. This ended up being a fantastic choice as I ended up going almost immediately into a junior artist role at a games company using the skills I'd gained in my evenings. When I turned 17, I bought my first car and began driving into and from work. On my first ever journey home by myself in my car, I decided to stop at Burger King. I walked in, and the person behind the counter serving me was the ringleader of this bunch of twerps who'd been making my life hell throughout high school. It was a beautiful moment. I made my order and he started asking me what I'd been doing. I didn't even have to be a dick about it. The reality of the situation was so amazing that all I had to do was tell the plain truth. I'd been working at 17 on a AAA PS3 game and had just bought my first car, had 0 qualifications and more importantly no student loan. Seeing his face as he then had to process my order was like the universe giving me a big nudge and a wink. Like it was going, see, I told you it'd all be worth it. TLDR, I got bullied in school and started teaching myself 3D art then. After leaving school at 16 got served in Burger King by the main bully just after buying my first car whilst making PS3 games. Sorry for bad grammar. This is why I became an artist and not a writer. I was a huge tomboy in grade school, a teacher's pet nerd / geek, giant glasses tomboy. Brushing hair was for sissy girls, and sissy girls were stupid. I didn't get along with any of the girls in my grade, but I did alright hanging with the guys, except for one guy. We'll call him Lopez. Lopez was the alpha of 4th grade, and it bothered him to have a girl sit at the guys' table. I tried ignoring him, but it didn't work. One day, while I was playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with the guys, he came up and took over the game. Unusual critter, this is a guy's game. Shut up. I'm Leonardo. I've got 2 swords, and I'm the leader. He laughed and sneered a little. You're not Leonardo. You're Ima. For the record, I still hate Ima. Passionately. Needless to say, the nickname stuck. The next time I tried to eat lunch with the guys, Lopez told me in no uncertain terms that there were no girls allowed at the guys' table. He told me I was girl, an ugly girl, but still a girl, and that girls were only good for growing up and having babies. Not that it mattered, because I was so nasty nobody would want to marry me anyways. In retrospect, he must have been parroting things he heard from his dad, because where the heck would a 9-year-old boy get that from, anyways? Slowly but surely, he turned the tide of the other guys against me, but by that point I'd burned my bridges hanging out with the girls. So that's why I spent the next 2 years of lunch times by myself at a corner table next to the autistic kid in our class, eating as fast as I could, so I could go play by myself on the swings, and not look so pathetic or break down crying in front of everyone. It was not very much fun. Fast forward a couple years, and I saw him in the beginning of high school, and he turned into a young Brad Pitt. It was so unfair. He was just drop dead gorgeous. I hated him so much, had hated him for years, but as soon as I saw him my heart twisted inside me, and I fell hopelessly in lust for the first time of my young life. Unfortunately, I was still a tomboy geek. I got heavy into grunge fashion in junior high, and just kept wearing it, because it was comfortable. Also, I wore patchouli oil, because I actually liked the way it smelled, and nobody had the decency to tell me that it smells like rat pee to the general populace. He wasn't mean to me, he just didn't know I existed. That was almost worse. I could have stood right in front of him, doing jumping jacks, and he would have just long gazed past me. Besides, hotter girls than me were flinging their vajayjays at him with reckless abandon, so I knew I didn't have a chance. Fast forward a couple of years, it was the end of sophomore year in college. I'd grown up, learned what a hairbrush was, and stopped hiding myself in giant flannel shirts. He, on the other hand, had gone a bit downhill. Not much, but he was no longer ripped. Turns out he did steroids in high school. His skin looked old. He did some cocaine, too, and he'd put on some weight. He was studying to be a computer programmer, and, well, yeah. It's hard to stay in shape doing that. I had put on weight too, but at that point it was a good thing, since I was too thin growing up. I'll just be blunt, I used to be hot. I saw him in the hallway, on a day I was wearing a brand new outfit I'd just splurged on a great hair day, where my makeup turned out just right. He stopped dead, and his mouth dropped open. Unusual critter? Is that you? Hey, Lopez. Wow. You look amazing. We proceeded to chat for a while, just about nothing, but I was late for class, and had to go. Right before I left, he shook his head. Who would have thought, all those years ago, he gestured at himself, and at me, that I'd grow up to the nerd, and you'd grow up to be, well, you look great. It's been over 10 years since that meeting, and it still makes me smile every time I think of it. TLDR. Haha, Lopez. You could have had all the untrimmed, patchouli scented poontang you wanted, but you missed your chance. Edit. Spelling. I don't care if this gets buried, it's going to feel real good to talk about. In middle school I was bullied for liking pro wrestling and alternative music. I'm female, by the way. Strange thing was, my main bully liked pro wrestling as well. He had a WWF backpack for God's sake. I guess I just liked the wrong guys? I don't even know. Anyway, they would sit next to me and whisper awful things to me in one class in particular, until I just ended up in the nurse's office every day in order to avoid them. My parents were splitting up at this time and neither of them seemed to notice that I was failing classes or getting notes sent home. The kids would yell at me as I walked down the hallway, make fun of my clothes. I was fairly poor in a fairly upper class small town, and generally just make my life hell until I changed schools. Now I'm in my late 20s. I've certainly come out of my ugly duckling phase, thank God. I have a job managing a fairly successful band. I travel the world 9 months out of the year, and the last time I ran into my main bully was on tour. He was a busboy at a restaurant in the same town we happened to have a show in. He didn't look bad, maybe a little larger, but I had heard from mutual friends that he knocked some girl up and ended up stuck in this shit town. Never really did much of anything after high school. He definitely recognized me, and I made sure he knew I recognized him. But the real kicker? Eating dinner with me was a famous, as in crossover to mainstream media famous, WWE World Champion, who I happen to know through mutual friends. I've never felt more like I've made it than in that moment. TLDR made fun of for liking rock and roll and pro wrestling. Suck it everyone. I actually have a decent story for this thread, hoping it doesn't get buried. It's a good one, stay with me. Growing up I was very athletic, but was one of only 3 kids on most of the sports teams in my town that was also in honors/advanced classes. Up until my sophomore year in high school, I was just a shade over 5 feet tall. Middle school and freshman year of high school sports were a misery for me because I was little. I loved to play and did more than hold my own, but was picked on relentlessly since I was a nerd who spent just as much time on schoolwork. I got shoved face down in mud, thrown against lockers, verbally abused day in and day out, you name it. It didn't help that I was a little wise ass who didn't take their shit, and my quick retorts and insults just resulted in more beatings, where I couldn't defend myself physically. There were 2 major culprits behind my bullying. We can call them Tom and Jerry for the sake of anonymity. Tom and Jerry were best friends, both much larger than me at the time, and Jerry was the bigger dickhead of the bunch on a daily basis. It was lacrosse season my freshman year of high school, and I was always a standout player in this sport despite my stature. During an internal scrimmage, Tom and Jerry decided to see who could get away with slashing me more. Slashing, for those of you who don't know, is when you hack at somebody in unprotected areas with your stick, or swing with the intent to hurt instead of the intent to defend. Tom stopped after 1 or 2 after I slashed him back, lightly. I made my point, but our team couldn't afford to lose him, but Jerry went to town as much as he could regardless of what I did. I got hurt pretty badly that day, but didn't retaliate as I didn't want to injure my own teammates. It was the last straw for me, and I had a discussion with my coach after practice, and was told to stop being such a bussy. After that I went home, had a serious talk with my parents, and I begged them to let me go to the private high school that had been heavily recruiting me to go there on a full ride for athletics and academics. My parents obliged me with a visit. I loved it, and I transferred away from public school at the end of my freshman year. Tangentially, this was the best decision I ever made, by the way. Made lasting friendships, and had an incredible high school experience after that. The summer between freshman and sophomore year I grew over a foot and stood at 6 feet 2. I had also began working out and was really seeing results. I had the good fortune of playing lacrosse at a high level, and both Tom and Jerry were also good players in high school. I was always a defenseman, and one of the highlights of my life was being told that we were playing their team in an exhibition match. Long story short, the opposing team's goaltender threw a hospital pass to Jerry. A hospital pass is one that's high up in the air, so you have to extend upwards and expose your torso completely if you want to wrangle the ball in. I acted very quickly, and with perfect timing I speared the living shit out of Jerry with a vicious, but legal, body check as soon as his feet hit the ground. Vicious. I hit him perfectly with my right shoulder, lifted him off the ground, and quite literally drove him back about 8 feet from where he was standing when he landed. I heard the crowd react to the hit, and heard the ref blow the whistle immediately to stop play, but my hit was so forceful that I separated my shoulder and got the wind knocked out of me. I also caught my arm on his helmet going down, and was gushing blood from the gash. I was on the ground for about a minute before I could move. Jerry fared worse, however, as he was out cold from the force of it. I'd later find out he broke his wrist from the fall and a few ribs from the hit. Separated shoulder and all, I pulled myself up, tore off my helmet, dropped it on the ground, and made my way over to where Jerry had came back to consciousness on the field. My old coach was there and immediately recognized me, with shock in his eyes, but Jerry was too stupid to realize that I was the same 5-foot kid from 8 months ago. My coach was also on the field at the time and he knew my background with this team and these two kids. All of the memories, him picking fights with me, the name calling, the physical pain, the embarrassment of being torn apart in front of girls, his parents telling my parents to fuck off when they approached them to discuss Jerry's bullying. It was a perfect moment. Eyes smoldering, I made my way to the other side of my old coach. The ref probably thought I was checking on him in good sportsmanship, but no, not quite. Remember me, asshole? Sometimes the little guys get bigger. I hocked the best logi I could muster, spit in his face, and was promptly thrown out of the game. He was howling in pain, and I got to add insult to injury. He also missed the remainder of the season. The entire time, Tom was about 15 feet away to witness the whole thing. He was on the same midfield line as Jerry, and I could see a mixture of shock, surprise, and fear in his face as he recognized me and saw that I was capable of delivering the physical punishment I just delivered to Jerry, and that I remained stoic despite the obvious physical pain I had to be in. I eyeballed him the entire time I was being escorted off the field, bloody, separated shoulder. Jerry was out of school for a few days, and when he came back looking rough, word eventually spread around my hometown that I was the reason. I haven't seen Jerry since, but I do know from mutual friends he has been in and out of prison and is a deadbeat dad to 2 children. For the rest of high school, though, I was told he stopped picking on other kids. So did Tom. As chance would have it, Tom was in the city that I was living on business 10 years later. He added me on Facebook and asked if he could meet me for a drink 10 years later. Why not? So I met him, we shook hands. He bought me a drink and told me that day on the lacrosse field changed his perspective about how to treat other people and that he could tell the hit on Jerry was also meant for him. He told me, verbatim, that he got the message loud and clear when I stared him down that day. He apologized over and over for the years of misery, chalked it up to being young, stupid, and wanting to fit in with the cool crowd, and then told me he had his first kid on the way. We had more than a few more drinks and continued to catch up. He turned into a respectable man with a good head on his shoulders, has a beautiful family, and by all accounts, looks to be a model father to his children. He's also a successful entrepreneur. He hasn't spoken to Jerry at all since high school. TLDR, had 2 bullies. Got revenge on one, reconciled with the other. One is a criminal and deadbeat dad, the other is the exact opposite. Some people change, some people don't. In middle school there were obviously cliques, one of them being the cool kids. Duh. This clique had a self-proclaimed leader. Let's just call him Jay. This guy was the coolest kid in school, and as the self-proclaimed leader of this cool kid group, kids needed his permission to hang out in their area during lunch/recess, etc. I had other friends who were deemed cool enough to hang out in that area, so I wanted to join them. He would always tell me I wasn't cool enough to hang out there, or on days where he wanted like chips or a soda or something he would let me stay for $1. And being that little kid trying so hard to be in the cool kid club, I would give it to him. That lasted about 6 months before I got sick of the constant teasing from Jay and the other cool kids and decided to make new friends, since clearly my old ones now thought I was below them. Middle school logic. Anyways, this kind of tarnished my middle school experience, basically losing my best friends because I wasn't even allowed to hang out in the same area as them. But whatever, they obviously weren't great friends. I also ended up going to high school with Jay, but we never had classes together, or any interaction for that matter. We would see each other around campus, but not really acknowledge each other's existence. Fast forward to about 3 months ago. I'm now 25 years old. Plenty of friends. Look great. I used to be a fatus. Lost about 115 lbs. Finished college. Great job. Etc. etc. I went to the local Chili's, just an average bar and grill, and wadayak now. Jay is my server. He instantly recognized me and made small talk. The typical "how have you been? What are you doing?" blah blah, and through this, I learned that he recently had to drop out of college and take on 2 serving jobs to support a child that he had. I didn't ask, but I assumed it was unplanned. Dinner carried on, just the usual stuff, nothing out of the norm. Jay drops off the check and we chat a bit more. At this point I just feel I have to say something and just ask something along the lines of, "Do you realize you made my middle school experience absolutely miserable?" It was probably a dick question, but damn, he faked my world up. His answer was very apologetic, how he didn't realize the impact of what he was doing, etc. etc. I told him it doesn't matter, it's in the past, but that I just wanted him to know. Our bill was around $35, I left him $140 in cash in the book and left. I don't like that forced/awkward conversation that follows when someone is accepting a huge tip. I like to get out of there before they open it. Caught him on my way out, thanked him for the service, and wished him the best for himself and his son, and went on my way. I never did hear from him. It's not like we exchanged numbers or are friends on FB or whatever, but I hope that he used the $100+ tip to buy his son something nice. Grudges aren't worth holding on to, but I won't lie, simply telling him he made my life miserable felt relieving. This will get buried, but oh well. I went to school with this girl and we used to be friends when we were younger, but as we got older things got different. I never bothered with her, but she always made it a point to make sure that everyone knew how poor I was. We both came from single mothers, but her father paid child support, so I knew that's how she got all her clothes and makeup. I admit I was a bit jealous, but then I realized she looked down on everyone for everything. I forgot about her as I got older, because I moved away, but I moved back to my hometown a few years later, and graduated with my JED. I didn't see her until a few years later, when we both ended up working at the same grocery store. I always made it a point to be nice to her, because I knew she had 4 kids to support, and her man didn't do anything. I guess it finally got to me how she was acting. She always commented on the customer's clothes or social situation. I really got pissed when she commented on an old man's grocery situation. He was on a fixed income and only bought the necessities. I ignored her and left my till to bring his groceries outside, apologizing for her attitude towards him. He was nice about it, but he had tears in his eyes. After that I reported her to the managers and pretty much made her life a living hell. I always one-upped her on customer service and encouraged the customers to report her for the attitude. She didn't last long, and to be honest I don't feel bad about it. I met her just last month and she was trying to be nice to me, but I told her quite nicely to stuff it because she's a horrible person. I haven't seen her since, but it still irks me how a person who has nothing can literally be a sheet sandwich still. I guess it bothers me because soon after she did that to the old man he passed away from a heart attack. Edited for misspelled words. She was in my ward in the Mormon church. Wards are determined by location. She lived only 2 streets down, right around the park. Before we had cell phones, most kids started getting them around middle school, but our Mormon leaders counseled our parents to have us wait, lest we communicate or interact without supervision. I'd talk to her on the landline, then slowly start to walk over. She could always tell by the static that I was coming over. It was a weird relationship. We were friends sometimes, and I never seemed to know when she'd want me around. But we were in church together, which meant for over a decade we saw each other every day. Once she promised to have her mom give me a ride home after a game. We were in church basketball together. She was our star player. I was decent at assists. I'd pass the ball to her, she'd sink it. It was a good strategy. We defeated all the other wards in our stake, which might have been impressive if we weren't female. The guys had ceremonies and medals. We got green jello with carrots and a lecture from the High Council not to wear such short shorts. Afterwards, when the parking lot was empty and everyone had already gone home, she told me the car was full. She, another girl, and her mom laughed at me and left. It took me 3 hours to walk home. After I told her I was in therapy, my mother had cancer, when I was 12, she told everyone in school that I was crazy. That persisted through my senior year of high school. Mormons aren't Scientologists, but they are not big on psychiatry. There have been some women coming forward, saying they were molested by their fathers, their leaders, their bishops and several prominent members of the apostles. Clearly their minds were twisted by therapists to create false memories. Therapists led astray by Satan. I have many stories like this, but they all end the same way. I forgave her and hated myself. It was easy to forgive her. She was incredibly beautiful. Just takes your breath away beautiful. Tall, tan, a volleyball and vocal star. Her eyes were the burnt sunflower brown. She got an athletic scholarship, which she turned down to get married. When we went out together, boys and full grown men would approach her. I was short, acneed, with green hair from swimming. One of her favorite jokes, "What's short, loud, and turns green in the summer?" She once told me I had the spirit of Satan inside me. I suppose that's how she, and the rest of the ward, justified their behavior. It was true. I was always trying to get out of church activities. I never bore my testimony, because I had none, and because I had no desire to talk in front of the people who made my life miserable about how much I loved the church. Being told I was going to hell didn't hurt me as much as other things she'd said. At least there wouldn't be any Mormons there. She said that shortly after I walked into a bathroom where she and several other girls had been talking about me. We were up at girls camp, a week-long prayer and scripture session up in the woods. I'd come into the bathroom to brush my teeth and stumbled on all the rest of my cabin taking showers. I said hi and joked with them a bit, but I suppose I fell silent or something because they thought I left. And once they did, they called me pathetic. Asked if I had seriously followed them after they had tried to get away from me. Asked how anyone could be so oblivious. Then imitated my voice, my manner. It couldn't have been more than a few seconds. The length of a very long painful breath. But they seemed to say so much before I managed to open my mouth and tell them to stop, that I was here, and god damn it I apologized. I told them I was sorry for overhearing, then made a break for it before they could get out. I spent the next couple hours, at least it felt like hours, hiding in the cafeteria. My mom was working there, although at nights she was in the leader's cabin. The next day, when I did find her and told her what happened, when I begged her to take me home, she told me I deserved it. My mother never believed what was happening, even when there were incidents in front of her. I would beg her to stay home from temple trips, from church, from seminary, but none of that was as important as church. The bully friend said it to my face, just a day or two after she'd begged my forgiveness for the shower incident. It was because I had an MP3 player, much smaller than iPods. It only held 24 songs. After the bathroom, I hadn't seen much point in attending sessions. Instead, I'd go wandering along the trails, listening to my MP3 player. I ignored her and left anyway. Her mother came after me a couple hours later and hauled me back to camp, lecturing me the whole way. She also mentioned the Satan spirit. That night, at the fireside, the leaders gave a talk about how some girls were bringing devils into the camp, smuggled inside their hearts. As I said, this is how they justified themselves. She got married right out of high school, 2 months before she turned 18. I wasn't invited, but that was okay. I'd been to Mormon weddings. You mostly wait outside the temple until they come out, then you take a lot of pictures. I hated having my picture taken almost more than being around Mormons. I now only went to church when I visited home from college. I didn't have the energy to fight my parents anymore. I saw a couple pictures of her on my Facebook feed. I could have hidden her status updates, but I didn't. Even after everything, she had this charisma. It was warm and beautiful, like her. The way she laughed, the way she moved, the way she never interrupted you. She had grace in everything, even in conversation, some sense of rhythm and other people. That seemed magic to me, who couldn't open her mouth without shoving her foot in. She was pregnant by Christmas, separated before I graduated. Divorce is serious in the Mormon church. It takes years and can only be done in the temple, like a marriage. And the stigma is terrible. There was this girl, Brittany. She and my bully friend were close for a couple years. She used to torture me too. Until her parents separated. There were a lot of comments about how children of divorce grew up to do drugs and have lots of sex. How the scars of divorce never go away. She was damaged goods. She stopped being invited to things. Eventually, she just faded away. She was only 11. I saw her, my bully friend, for the last time my junior year of college. Another girl from my ward had gotten married. Since the temple bit is so short, Mormons often have large receptions. My parents had serious money. Our backyard was a popular spot. This girl, who I called Redhead, when we first met at camp, her name tag had said Redhead, but the R had flaked off, had been in those showers. Once, I tried to tell her that I'd been assaulted. I told her a boy had put his hands on me when I said no, and that he had leaned in close, thrust his tongue in my ear, and, ooh, she had said on the phone, "Don't tell me anymore." So I didn't. I never called her again. I don't think she noticed. I helped with her wedding, yard work, arranging decorations, cleaning out my parents' koi pond. My parents are the worst kind of rich. On her wedding day, my mother told me to go upstairs and change into something more modest. Mormons hate sleeveless, clingy, short, anything that made me feel pretty or sexy. So I wore my little sister's prom dress to her reception. I wasn't particularly interested in watching Redhead strut, so I wandered to my side yard. She was there, shooting hoops. I stopped and watched. She used to come over sometimes to play horse, even though she had her own hoop at home. She was just as beautiful as she'd been in high school. After a while, I joined her. She told me about her life. How bored she was, alone with her kid all day. She had worked at a whitewater rafting operation, something that had seemed so cool to me as a teenager, but she'd quit when she got pregnant. She told me about her husband, about their problems, and how lonely she felt, stranded in our hometown, still living with her parents. She didn't tell me she was pregnant again, although maybe she didn't know. We went up to my old room and I gave her an armful of books to read, the books I hadn't loved enough to take with me to college. She used to make fun of me for reading. So had her mom. There goes 7:45 p.m, living vicariously through her books. She had told me this, then asked me what vicariously meant. She had loved the Narnia books though, and Lord of the Rings. I remembered that, so I gave her both series. I'd never been a big fan anyway, I had preferred Harry Potter. There's a picture of us, on New Year's 2000, holding up our favorite books, 11 and grinning. I still have it somewhere, buried under math notes, half-finished short stories, and the decoy journals I filled with lies, to throw off my mother. I told her to call me if she ever wanted more books or someone to talk to. She promised she would. I wasn't surprised when she didn't. From the FASA book, I know about the separation and the second kid. I know she's still living with her parents. I never asked for the books back. Sometimes, I open up a window on Facebook chat and type over and over again, "I love you, I love you, I love you." I never send it. EDIT equals thanks to whoever gave me gold. Second time I've been paid for writing. I got a sandwich at a playwriting competition. And a plaque, but I liked the sandwich better. Guess this isn't my throwaway account anymore. Thanks to everyone for the compliments, which I find both heartwarming and baffling. Now I'm off to find out what this Reddit gold does. My story is from the opposite angle. A girl thought she was confronting her high school bully when she ran into me. I was out to dinner with some of my wife's co-workers, and one of them said that she knew me from high school and that I'd picked on her relentlessly. I know that I wasn't mean to her, because the truth was, I wasn't a bully to anyone in high school. I've always been real chill. Not too popular, not too nerdy, but right in the middle. Got along with everyone. Not to mention the fact that this was a girl and I wouldn't pick on a girl. I was raised with manners. The biggest reason I knew that I never picked on her was I had no idea who this girl was. She obviously went to my high school, she knew some of the same people I knew, and mentioned being in some of my classes, but I for the life of me couldn't place her there. I told her that it couldn't possibly be me she was thinking of, and that I really had no idea who she was. She stabbed me with a fork and left. It was the last I ever saw of her. Later on at my wife's school, they are all teachers. This girl just walked out of her classroom one day and never returned. I was a sophomore when one of my friends, Blake, died. He accidentally shot himself while handling a gun at home. It hit us all pretty hard when we heard the news the next day. The worst part is, Blake wasn't even the first of my friends to die that year. I was enrolled in an art class, the kind where they pretty much let us choose our own projects. So we had genuinely committed art students mixed in with lazy douchebags who were in it for the easy A. One such douchebag was a senior named Zach. I was a lanky, awkward drama kid, and therefore an ideal target for someone like Zach, being your typical popularity-driven dickhead of larger, heavier build. He and I had words every few days or so. He really got off on making me miserable. Anyway, day after Blake's death, I'm on edge, can't concentrate on anything. The air in the room is heavy with silence as the students struggle to focus on their art projects. Zach figures, hey, what better time to assert his dominance over Proto than in the wake of his friend's sudden and horrible death. He starts prodding, bumping into me as he crosses the room, sneaking in snide remarks, the works. I'm bottling it all up, cause I'm a good kid and whatnot, but it's really starting to boil. Zach ups his game by kicking the legs out from under my chair. I jump to my feet, red with anger, and a loud what the fuck crashes through my teeth. Zach, having achieved his goal, belts out a hearty laugh. I come unglued, harsh words are exchanged. Before the teacher can get the situation under control, Zach spews out some loud, vitriolic remark like, I'm not the one who's got dumbers friends that blow their own faces off. I attack him, but Zach puts a beating on me before the teacher splits us up. I'm absolutely shaking with frustration and defeat. Fast forward 5 years. I've been in the Air Force a while. I'm on my way home on leave to visit old friends, waiting on a connecting flight. I'm killing time at a Starbucks near that SAT checkpoint, when who do I see slinking through the metal detector but Zach. My chest quakes in an instant huff of derision. Being empowered by my military status, I make my approach. As I close the distance, I start to see just how shitty Zach looks. Broken, miserable. The sight makes me glow a little bit. I saunter up with a triumphant, "What's up, Zach?" He doesn't even recognize me. I have to remind him who I am. The conversation turns up a few interesting facts. Zach works at a dead-end job, still lives with his parents, and never went to college. Never accomplished anything, never escaped our shitty hometown, and I guessed that all his fair weather friends abandoned him after high school. This guy, this old king of high school, had nothing, and it showed. I got to brag about all the cool shit I'd been up to, all the places I've seen. Oh, nothing much, just catching some of the world's most dangerous bad guys, preserving billions of dollars worth of air power assets, saving lives. Hardly worth talking about. I never did get to return the beating Zach gave me in school, at least in the physical sense. But I absolutely adored how defeated that some bitch's face looked once he realized that this skinny drama geek had conquered some shit he never even dreamed about. I laugh every time I think about that chance encounter. Edit. Yeah, I know it's not very inspirational, but my friend didn't deserve to die, and he certainly didn't deserve to have his memory insulted the very next day. I still see the bully's situation as an appropriate case of comic whiplash. In middle, and even into high school, there was an asshole who picked on this disabled girl named Emily. This asshole tormented everyone he felt he could pick on, and no one liked him because of this, so most of us just tuned him out. But I knew that this girl, Emily, who was paralyzed and in a motorized wheelchair, really was hurt by Mr. Asshole. A couple people and I tried standing up for her, but he kept bullying her, and she moved schools freshman year because of him. I felt bad, but eventually, I forgot about it and moved on. Now, 7 years out of high school, I work as a sound engineer. I run and design live sound systems freelance, but my constant source of employment comes from one venue. There, I run sound for anything from plays and musicals to live concerts. About twice a month, we have a local kids with disabilities group come and watch a matinee performance of a play or musical, and afterwards, they meet the actors and stuff. Well, about 6 months ago, I was anxiously pacing in the lobby waiting for my boss to come in, because we had had something major break in our smaller theater. It just so happened that in the larger theater, the special needs kid group was watching a performance of The Little Mermaid, and one of the staff members from the special needs kids group was Mr. Asshole. The irony. I was shocked, but recognized him immediately. He had put on weight, and was covered in tattoos. I was shocked to see him working with these kids, given his history. I went up and talked to him, and he recognized me, probably because I don't think I've changed since high school appearance-wise, size. Anyway, I asked about what he does, after he asked about my profession. Needless to say, he hadn't changed at all. Man, I hate these faking kids, but I can't find else to do, he said. Anyway, I ended the conversation and immediately went back to my booth to turn The Little Mermaid show. After the show, I wasted no time calling the person in charge of the disabilities group and telling them about Mr. Asshole's history and what he had said to me earlier in the day. Mr. Asshole was fired. I don't care if he couldn't find other work. He deserved it, and those kids don't do anything to have him care for them. My girlfriend's younger sister is autistic, and she's great. Mr. Asshole got what was coming to him. That was for Emily. I grew up in a small town where the people you went to kindergarten with were the same people you graduated high school with. If you were in, it was great. If you did something embarrassing, you could never live it down. I was friends with basically everyone, except one group of girls that really didn't like me because they were just horrible human beings, and I called them on it. They used to make fun of one kid because his mom died of cancer, absolutely tormented another girl when she was raped and reported it, and of course the usual bullying of people who were fat or had acne. Yeah, you get the picture. So fast forward to college, all of the girls were accepted to one school, well known for its part as not academics, except for one girl I'll call K. I stayed more local for my general ed because I had a free ride at the junior college, one of the best in the nation, and wanted to save money. I ended up with one class with her, and she was obviously trying to impress this guy who wouldn't give her the time of day. I'm hanging out in the library with said guy and about 12 other people, and Kay comes running up and says, "Oh my god. Hey girl, looks at guy, oh my god. Trapdoor underscore Lalita, and I went to school together our whole lives. We are like best friends." I raised my eyebrows and said, "We are not friends. We haven't spoken since you told the exchange student to wash her dirty brown skin in gym, and I told you to fuck off." Honestly, if we were assigned to work together, or I saw her in public, I would have been civil, but I wasn't about to play along and pretend like we were ever friends. I don't associate with trash like that. I knew this guy throughout middle and high school. Football star and a real bruiser. I once saw him pick up a bike with a kid on it after the kid had mouthed off while passing and throw him to the ground. He was always pushing around or mocking other kids. He also happened to be smart, and we were in the same advanced classes. The one time he tried to get me to fight him, I was so unprepared, I lamely told him to pick on someone his own size. So he got down on his knees and asked, "Will you fight me now?" I couldn't help laughing, which broke the tension and probably saved my skin. Anyway, at our 20th reunion, this skinny guy yells out my name and comes over with a huge grin. I did not recognize him until he told me his name. He proceeded to tell me that he had always admired me, how I'd gone into the arts and made a career of it, and how jealous he was. Then he told me about how his dad had pushed him around, told him not to be weak, forced him into sports, and drilled aggression into him, basically prodded him to be a bully. His father never let him do anything remotely creative. As a direct result, he has supported his kids' choices and made sure they had access to creative outlets and refused to force them to be something they weren't. He has an amazing career and is married to his high school sweetheart, who helped him steady out after getting away from his dad. It was my most enjoyable experience of the night, and I was so disappointed to discover that he now lives several hours away. I think if he lived closer, we'd be great friends. TLDR asshole, because of dad, turns out to be amazing guy. I'm going to warn you alright, now that this will probably be a long story. My best friend growing up was named John. In hindsight, he was a terrible friend. He only spent time with me because we were the biggest losers in our class and the other kids didn't want anything to do with us. I was the fat cheeky kid who froze up around girls. John wasn't nerdy or fat, but he was incredibly awkward at times. He was the kind of person that laughed too loud at his own jokes. I was an only child who never had anyone to spend time with while I was growing up. I think that is why I was so desperate to be friends with John. Unfortunately, John only really spent time with me when he wanted something from me. He visited my home when he wanted to borrow my toys / basketball / money. I was so pathetic at the time that I would give him anything he wanted and he rarely ever gave anything back. Our relationship was like that until we went to high school. John tried out for the basketball team our freshman year. He didn't make it, but the coach took pity on him and sort of made him an assistant manager for the sports department. So in one way or another, John became involved with every sports team our class had. This led to him spending more time with the popular kids. He sort of figured out how to stop being so awkward and he eventually became one of the cool kids. I tried to stay friends with him, but he made it painfully clear that he didn't want anything to do with me anymore. It was also around this time that I started going through some serious personal problems, medical issues / family issues / money issues. High school ended up being the worst period in my life. While I was going through hell, John was going to parties and living it up with his new friends. At one point in my senior year, I was considering killing myself. I practically begged John to spend some time with me. I didn't tell him I was suicidal though. He knew about some of the things I was going through, and I sort of expected him to take pity on me. He just brushed me off though and ignored me. Well, I decided I wanted to at least live through college. So after high school, I started working hard to turn my life around. I lost weight, improved my social skill, and took care of some family issues. College helped me gain more confidence in myself, and afterwards I decided to start a small online business I had been thinking about for a while. I worked constantly to get things running, and now my business makes me quite a bit of money. I'm not filthy rich or anything, but I'm doing better than I ever expected I would be. I was so focused on improving my life that I had completely forgotten about John for a long time. I ran into him last year though. My girlfriend and I were out grocery shopping one morning. We turned the corner into an aisle and John was standing there stocking the shelf. He and I just stared at each other for what felt like an eternity. Last time we had seen each other, I was the fat loser, and he was a cool kid. Now I'm in great shape, and I had a gorgeous girl clinging to my side. John had gained 50 pounds, and started going bald. I tried to talk to him, but he made some excuse about needing something in the back of the store and he ran away. I decided to find out what happened to him by looking up his Facebook, Twitter, and other online accounts. From what I can tell, he started working at the grocery store to help pay for college. All the kids from high school stopped talking to him and each other when they all separated for college. John went to school for some sort of sports administration degree. I'm not really sure what his major was, but he talked about becoming a basketball coach on his Facebook account. Well, he couldn't get another job after college, so he has just been working at the grocery store ever since. It sounds like he had student loans that took him a while to pay off, so he moved back into his mom's house to save money. His long-term girlfriend cheated on him. His only friends are the kids he works with at the grocery store. Most of them seem like assholes who just like to make fun of him on Facebook. He spends a lot of his money on beer and lottery tickets. He also spends most of his free time playing League of Legends. I use this site to look up his account, and he plays at least 5 games a day. His whole life just seems like one massive train wreck ever since high school. I have to admit that I was feeling pretty great about myself when I ran into John at the grocery store. It was nice to know that things had gone better for myself than they had for John. However, I just feel terrible for him now. This is just an anti-bully story, sorry if it doesn't fit in here. Anyway, I have always hated bullies. I was never really the victim as I was fairly athletic / smart and possibly oblivious. Lol, anyway, in high school I was in the advanced classes and one kid was sitting with me. I grew to like him. He was picked on all the time. I knew about it. You could see it often in the hallway. There was one hallway in particular where bullies liked to practice their ways. There was a long stairway and the same more popular crowd would be sitting on those stairs on off periods and lunch. Well, in high school I was the smallest of my friends, and I was about 180 back then, and working out daily. A few of my friends were topping out around 280. The one in this story was about 300. Mostly muscle as he was juicing even back then. Totally nice guy back then. I hear he is a career criminal now. Anyway, not to be pulled off story. We were all sitting on the stairs when I see my little buddy walking the gauntlet of the hallway. I notice a more popular kid walking towards him and starts in on him. Eventually has him pinned up against the lockers and is mocking and taunting him for everyone's enjoyment. I nudged my friend and pointed it out and said, "That is wrong." I forget my exact words. He looked over, then said, "Yeah, fuck that." This kid was only 17 or so at the time, but 280 to 300 pounds or so and very nimble. Anyway, he walked up behind Chat and without even a warning just grabbed him from behind and chucked him across the hall into the opposite lockers. He then walked over, picked him up like a child and dumped him right into a large open-mouthed garbage can. At that precise moment the vice principal came around the corner and saw it. He asked, "What is going on here?" I spoke up and said, "Just sending a message that we don't like bullies around here." He looked around, saw what had been going on. "I'm not lying," he said very loudly. "Good, I don't like bullies either." There was not one more incident at that high school. Everyone was convinced my monster-sized friend had a free pass to beat on them if they picked on anyone. Lol, feel good about that, even though it wasn't me that did anything. First post ever. What's up, Reddit? Just reading through this thread really hits home with me, so I've decided to stop lurking hardcore and share my story. As a kid I was really sick with asthma and eczema, in and out of the hospital type stuff. Parents tried everything and went to a laundry list of doctors to try and find something to help me. Eventually, I was able to be put into a test group for a new topical ointment around probably 99. I was still just a youngin' at the time. But before that we had tried some type of medical steroids or some nonsense, and I came to find out later in childhood that one of the side effects was weight gain. And I gained a lot. Towards the end of 4th grade, I was a big kid. So naturally, being the fat kid, school was hell. Even your friends make fun of you. Not a good experience. The bullying continued throughout middle school, and on top of that I had a stepdad who was verbally abusive. Middle school was a really rough time for me. By 8th grade my self-worth was a joke. Someone tells you how worthless/useless you are enough times you start to believe them. And I was still fat, lol. Perfect storm for a hell of a childhood. And I was a Boy Scout, can't forget to add that. Fortunately it wasn't all terrible. By chance there were a small handful of people who were nothing but supportive and really helped me get through this. 3 of those people, and probably the most important, were my mother. I know, sounds silly, but my biological father wasn't around much during that time, so she was the only parent I had really, and she really was a huge component of me wanting to keep moving forward and be successful, etc. The other 2 people were my 2 best friends who fortunately lived 2 towns north of me, so as kids we couldn't hang out all the time. But thanks to Sparks Live we were able to communicate really often, and they really are the best friends I could have ever asked for. Genuinely great guys. We for a time were the epitome of a nerdy triforce. I'm the youngest of the 3 of us, and we are all either in college and working. I turn 21 in a couple months, and we are still best friends. We have been since I was in the 4th grade. So thanks to them, I made it through the hell that middle school was, and into high school. For some reason, and I'm thankful for this, the bullying stopped for the most part when I was a freshman. Bullying really is an awful entity that exists, but looking back on it, it really helped me. Instead of being bitter it made me accepting, and instead of anger it motivated me. So despite the depression and heartache of it all, it made me a stronger person and helped me come out of my shell. Finally, the point of that story was so I can tell you this story. Long story short, jokes on all of the people who brutally and mercilessly poked fun at the fat kid because 1. Being fat and knowing people have a natural affinity to make fun of fat people, I developed a wicked sense of humor and actually became pretty funny. 2. Being a social outcast, I spent a lot of time playing Halo 2 on XBL, so naturally I became a pro at talking trash. 3. High school came around and all of the cool kids in middle school fell off and either became not cool. And 4. Myself on the other hand played a season of football my freshman year, slimmed down enough to start running track until I was a junior, essentially went from zero to hero, went from knowing no one to knowing what I feel like was everyone by my junior year, including the seniors. Whoa, super cool, right? Started getting invited to parties, all the stereotypical cool kid activities I suppose. Had my first kiss the beginning of my junior year with a super cutie. I gained a few inches in height, lost a lot of weight, talked to / dated a few girls the beginning of junior year, then around December of 11th grade started dating my crush. Since my freshman year, I stopped partying the summer after my junior year, so I could focus on school and my super awesome girlfriend, and by the time I graduated, with a 3.1 GPA. As a slacker, I couldn't have been more content. I still won the senior superlative life of the party, was nominated for Homecoming King, came in second by half a point in the senior boys talent show / beauty pageant, and I ended up having a really awesome high school experience. So the joke is on the bullies, cause look at me now HATERZ. But on a serious note, I've had forgiven everyone a long time ago. I have no hard feelings. I understand those kids were going through just as much as I was, and in a way I hope I helped them get through their time of need. And I always was, and always will be, no matter how popular I got, or how big my ego was, I will always befriend the little guy and the outcasts, and I'll always do my best to help anyone who needs it. So I really should thank everyone who made fun of me. They catapulted me to my greatness. And in case anyone was curious, where I'm at now, turning 21 soon, starting a regiment of picking up heavy objects and putting them down on a regular basis. I have a goal to get seriously ripped, because I never have been, and I don't want to be fat again, lol. I'm attending school, pursuing a BS and eventually a DPT. Physical therapy, and I'm still dating, going on 4 years this December, the former captain of the cheerleaders who is a soon to be very hot nurse. I have no complaints. Moral of the story, don't let people get you down. And I apologize for the super long read. If you got through it all, thanks for reading. I was bullied relentlessly as a kid. I was scrawny, awkward and constantly lost in my own imagination. Think Ferdinand the Bull, as a bean thin 9-year-old. In any case, one of the bullies, David, was one of the ringleaders of my tormentors, constantly harassing and beating me up, throwing sand in my face, and trying to run me over with his bike. Needless to say, it was scarring for me, as a new immigrant and a scared kid. About 15 years later I had grown to well over 6 feet, and I'm decently built. Puberty was nice to me. I was walking through a park when I saw David in the distance on a bike. I could still recognize him, and he clearly recognized me. He started biking towards me and yelling names, just as he used to. It was a surreal experience, and anyone who has been badly bullied knows it doesn't take much to take you back to that nervous place. He was biking towards me pretty fast, but the thing was, I thought he was much farther away. As he got closer, I realized that he had barely grown a foot since elementary school. As he rode his bike faster and faster, I couldn't help being shocked at how small he was, inside and out. I stuck out my leg. He ran his bike into it, stopping his tire and flipping him over his handlebars. It was a bit anticlimactic really. I helped him back up. He scuttled backwards and rode away fast. Now with the strangest look I have ever seen. I think it was one of confusion that people grow up, change and move on. I sometimes wonder if he never grew past those bullying days when he was a much bigger man. Oh lords, the bully stories I have. Let's start with my biggest and best. The first one of note was during 6th grade. I was bullied a lot by people. I'm talking scars that haunt me to this day. A lot of really depressing issues, but I hide them well and keep driving for success. But there was one in particular whom picked on me constantly. I was taught never to fight unless absolutely 100% necessary, and even then, don't even talk back to them. Obviously you take years of holding it in, you lash out. Luckily for me, I'm not dumb enough to end up on the 5 o'clock news. Moving on, he kept picking on me until one day I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. I just woke up pissed, didn't want to go to school for obvious reasons, but was ushered anyway. He came up behind me and yanked my backpack. Mind you, I'm not a small guy. I'm currently 6 feet 2 and pushing 300 plus. At the time I was about a head taller than most kids and wider, but I was always the gentle giant, quiet bookworm type in those days. Well, the faker decides to push my buttons for the last time and I lose it. The second he pulls, I don't relax. I'll let him pull it off and I turn, ready to rock. I call him out in front of the entire school. I believe the exact words after him yanking my backpack all the time and grabbing me inappropriately. Kid was a weirdo. I had enough. I stormed toward him with every ounce of rage and hatred I had, and the dude took off. I calmly keep walking after him, and eventually around the corner comes the whole bully crew. I'd say 0.6, 7, including him. They all are pushing and laughing, figuring they were going to jump me. They soon realized that numbers wouldn't do shit in my mind. I kept marching forward, fists clenched, and all of what friends I hadn't have said I get a look in my eye. My best friend to this day told me that the look I get makes him shiver and feel horrible. They all saw this look, and all 7 of them ran off. Not one stood up. The bell rung, and I went to class, with a ton of people gossiping about me. Fast forward a few days later, it's school photo day. I'm doing my own thing as always, and while in line the poor sap gets to stand right next to me. He bawls his eyes out, he's 2 years older, and begs me not to kick his ass, that he's so sorry for bullying me, and he won't ever mess with me again. I agree, having time to cool my inner thoughts and collect myself. We shake hands. Never spoke again until a party earlier this year. The dude avoided me the entire time, but from what I understand, a lot of people say he straightened out and became a lot better of a person. TLDR bully got put in his place, cried, apologized, became a better person. I got teased and made fun of a decent bit in middle school, but nothing crazy bad. I wasn't popular, but I wasn't the biggest nerd, so it was nothing terrible traumatic, just normal middle school bullshit. However, one time, a week before the 8th grade formal, one of the hottest girls in the grade, let's call her Kate, comes up to me and asks me if I will go to the dance with her friend. Now, this was a dream come true, because I was definitely in love with her friend. Let's call her Emily, but I wasn't stupid, so I knew there was something fishy. I said yes, just to see what the response would be, and she smiled and ran off. Later that week, this guy, call him Steve, comes up to me in the hallway and starts talking about the dance and how awesome it is going to be. I realize then that he has set up this whole joke. I don't know how it's going to end, but I know for certain that Emily isn't trying to date me, because I'm not stupid. Anyway, Steve convinces me to eat lunch that day at the cool table. I sit down and everyone is grinning and staring at me. I know I'm about to be humiliated, but I was prepared, so I wasn't very worried. Kate speaks up and is like, guess what? I cut her off and say, Emily doesn't want to go to the dance with me because I'm a loser. Saw it coming. I'd rather play StarCraft anyway. Thanks guys. And went to sit at my table. I got ribbed for it a bit until the year was over, and then whatever. Throughout high school Kate would continue to passive aggressively pick on me, and Steve was always a nuisance. Flash forward to our 5-year high school reunion. I apparently am not nearly as ugly as I used to be, and things haven't gone well for Steve and Kate. Steve is bald, a recovering meth addict, and pushing 250 lbs. Kate got pregnant and doesn't know who the daddy is because she can't track down 3 guys and get them to take paternity tests. I see Kate, say hi and buy her and her friends a drink and leave a huge tip, then go back to talking to my friends. Steve walks over to us, drunk and a sweaty mess. I pretend to not notice who he is and ask him if he is taking orders. When he barks out, don't you know who I am? I play dumb and make him explain. Then he asks me for $5. I smile, pull out a $20, give it to him, and give him a soft slap on the face and a get some help. I don't run into Emily for another year. When I see her, Jesus, just Jesus, she's beautiful. It's at a Christmas party of my dad's friend, and she is stunning. She approaches me and starts nervous small talk. Finally she launches into what seems like an apology that she had been rehearsing for some time. I cut her off and tell her that it was a long time ago and there is no need to apologize. She starts crying and says that it was so cruel and that she got her comeuppance. She dated a string of dickheads who screwed with her and she hasn't been happy since she went to the dark side popularity. I comfort her and we talk and drink into the night. We ended up hooking up for a while, but we both moved and lost touch for a while. My 10-year reunion is coming up. I saw Steve 2 weeks ago and he blurted out, "You hooked up with Emily." Haha, I hid it first in front of his buddies at the sports bar we were at. I replied with "oh." She told me, "We laughed about it a lot." I don't know what was funnier, the 30 seconds of sex or the fact that you cried about it afterwards. He went completely pale. All his buddies gave me high fives. My first love was this really terrible boy I met in middle school. I don't know why he would steal things from me, rip pages out of my books, say negative things about my appearance, tear up homework assignments of mine once in a while. I was really insecure and timid at the time and let it continue because deep down I think I liked the attention, even though it was all negative. We dated for a couple weeks before he broke up with me over the internet one day saying he just wanted to be friends, even though he would continue to make me feel bad about myself all the time. Some friend, right? I was devastated for years, the rest of junior high. Oh, young love. We went to different high schools and I eventually forgot about him. Fast forward another 10 years, I have outgrown being shy and awkward and have emerged a confident and foxy young lady. On a night when I'm looking particularly good, I run into him at a bar where he is now apparently working. He looks greasy and strung out, is about 50 lbs overweight, and is now living in his van in between crashing on couches because he is an irresponsible jerk and his life is a mess, despite having had good supportive parents, a decent upbringing, and many opportunities. When he recognizes me, he immediately looks stunned and regretful. He asks to exchange numbers to keep in touch, and we do. He sends me many texts me telling me how gorgeous I am, how crazy it is to run into each other after all these years, blah blah blah, yet he never once apologizes for, or even acknowledges how cruel he was to me. I proceed to blatantly, yet very politely, reject him every single time he tries asking me on a date, telling him I'm only interested in platonic relationships at this particular time. Too late, as whole. We can still be friends, though. Another update, I randomly saw him waiting at a bus stop looking dirty and haggard as fuck just a few weeks ago. What happened to you, Joey? In 10th grade the girl school bully, a tall, big girl even then, chased me and threatened to beat my ass. Then when I ran, I weighed like 90 pounds and was a total band nerd. She and her friends laughed at me. I was scared for weeks. Several times after that for years the same girl would lunge at me and my dork ears would shrink away. She never actually caught me after school, though a friend of hers did, and she surprised me from behind and smacked me across the head. My glasses got knocked off and broke. Flash forward about 13 years, around 2009, and there I am, no more glasses, lean and petite in my stiletto heels, clacking down the hall at the hospital, where I was administrator. I was called to the front of the small psych hospital to tend to a very distressed family who has brought in a suicidal man. He had attempted to take his life and the family finally got him to the hospital, but he was resisting care. I talked the man down and convinced him to sign in, all the while I'm fully aware that his daughter is Miss Big Bully. She looks rough, she's gained a lot of weight. She still outweighs me by a ton, but I still run fast, so I'm just focused on the patient. After he's settled and getting admitted, the former bully is just sobbing. He's been like this for years. Her mom has been gone since she was young. He's been a suicidal alcoholic for a long time. She's sad and worn out and has never been able to live her own life. I mention that we went to high school together. She comments on how great I look. I don't mention she bullied me. I make her dad a VIP, assign him my favorite doctor and check on him every day. He does better and discharges. The end. So cathartic. There was this dude in my app history class that was like a massive intellectual elitist. He always wanted to be the best at everything. I had a knack for history, so I tended to compete with him a bit, as is my nature, but he was just such a faking douche about it. Belittled me for not knowing things, teased me in the hallways when he walked past, dumped food on me during lunch a few times. Just a real asshole. Anyway, I have been out of high school roughly 5 years now, and just last week I was headed to a friend's place and decided to stop for some food in downtown. Along the way, I walk into a salad place and has the one assembling my salad. He seems very sad and doesn't even look at me until he rings me up, and he immediately recognizes me and calls me by an old teasing nickname he had for me. "So what are you doing these days, SC2 bench?" Not much, just working, that type of thing." "Oh, same. Where do you work?" At this point I turn around and point out the large glass face of the salad shop to the nicest skyscraper in the city right across the street. Actually the place I work in, they're doing system and network administration. Oh. When I went to go sit down, he went on break and came and sat with me and chatted. He had dropped out of college because he never got it in his head that he couldn't cruise through it like he did in high school. I mentioned that I nearly dropped out for the same reason. Maybe we should have gone to the same college so we could have competed with each other the whole time. We would have both graduated summa cum laude, haha. I don't remember his exact words here, but he basically expressed that he liked competing with me in high school, but he didn't know how to express his appreciation of me in any way other than being mean to me, and that he was sorry for acting that way. He apparently never reached out to me because he was afraid I hated him. I kinda did, but the whole situation was very touching, so I forgave him. I talked to him on Facebook yesterday, and I think I'm going to try to get him into some kind of technology training like Treehouse or Codecademy. I figure I get him into the same field as me, and I can use our competitive natures to make us both better at our jobs. I went to college in my hometown, but lived in my own house, and my housemates were party animals. I was, but also was determined to get great grades. I was the first person in my family to even consider college an option. I was at Denny's really late one night studying my ass off for a huge exam because my housemates were having people over, and the late night server was a friend from high school. The place was dead, so my server friend was sitting with me quizzing me when my girlfriend at the time showed up just to say hi and encourage me to take a break. While we were sitting there, this group of guys walked in, obviously drunk, and sat close to us, so the server went to service them. One of the guys was girlfriend's ex from something like 5 years ago, and he also went to high school with us and tortured me. Told everyone I was gay, so gym class sucked for me. Broke some of my sculptures in art class. Typical dickhead stuff. So my girlfriend and I are sitting there, and it's awkward for both of us, so we decide to jet. We are barely out the door when someone from behind pushes me, and as I stand up, there's a faking gun in my face, and on the other end is this bully. I do everything to keep my cool, but in the situation it's hard to think. I start asking the guy why he's such an asshole, and we talk for a while, more argue, but whatever, when out of nowhere this cop tackles the bully and just starts stomping him on the ground while another officer covers him and keeps the rest of the drunk friends inside. I'd be a liar if I said I didn't really enjoy watching this cop stomp on this guy so hard he's a bloody mess. It's important to note that I hate the police. I never saw the bully again, left town for grad school, but sometimes when I'm laying in bed I think about that moment and can't help but smile a little. TLDR, gun in my face outside Denny's. Cop actually protected me. There was this guy named Warren I went to school with. He put me through hell. Physical and verbal abuse, steal my sheet and break it, scratched fag in my locker, stole the sunglasses my dad gave me, and scratched faggot across the lenses. Even saw him a couple years after high school, when I was in college. He drove by and yelled faking faggot. As you can tell, he didn't have much of a vocabulary, and this sorta triggered what I assume is a PTSD episode, as I started hyperventilating, got really dizzy, and went and hid in the bathroom at school. Some friends came and talked me through it, but it was half an hour before I could leave. A friend of mine owns a bar and gets me to help bounce when she's got a metal/rock band in, since I'm 6 feet 2, 240 pounds, and have a little martial arts training. A few weeks ago, I was there working, and lo and behold, Warren walks in. It's been 6 years since I last saw him, and I'm really not looking forward to having to deal with him drinking. I wasn't even sure if he recognized me. After a couple hours, though, he came over, beer in hand. "Hey, Jmthetank. How you doing, man?" "Fine, Warren, thanks. Yourself?" "Good, man, good. You're looking good, dude. Looks like you lost some weight." "Thanks. Lost 50 pounds since January." "Right on. Well done, man. You're looking fit. Got a woman?" Yeah. I've got a girlfriend." "Awesome. Lose some weight and they come flocking to ya." "Got any kids?" "No, not yet." Kids are awesome. I've got 3 now and 1 on the way, and I think that'll be enough." "I see. Congratulations." "Yeah, it's pretty good." Then we just stood there, him watching the band, me surveying the crowd. After about 10 minutes, I had to go break up what was looking to become a fight in the mosh pit. Looked at him, said have a good night, enjoy the show, shook the hand he offered, and went back to work. I wanted to throw him out. I wanted to get him arrested. The cops come through regularly just to have a presence, and would haul out anyone I said was being a problem, and then throw them in the tank. I wanted revenge. But I had a job to do, and pulling shit like that would make my buddy's bar look bad. So he got to enjoy the show, and even helped me break up another fight later in the evening. So, anyway, yeah. That's my bully story. We'll never be friends, but I'm no longer afraid to see him on the street. Vess spent a good portion of my life in game dev. I graduated high school a year early and went straight to work for one of the major local arcade/console developers. About 7 years go by, I joined the military for some reason, and I returned to my hometown after getting out. All of my old coworkers/friends still worked for the main gamma dev company in the area, and I'm back in the industry. As a senior dev, I'm one of the big interviewers on my team. We get one guy coming in for an interview who was a bully to me from about 4th grade all the way up through high school. I was beaten up, made fun of for being a nerd, etc. I'd like to say I didn't realize it was going to be him, but I'll never forget the name, the face, etc. Anyways, the interview is for a junior dev position, and I'd already discussed with the other guys about his personality and what I remembered. If he seemed the same way, then we wouldn't hire him. A bad personality fit on a coding team is worse than someone who doesn't know how to program. So he shows up, and what are the first words out of his mouth when he sees me in front of everyone else? "Goodman paranoid? What the hell are you doing here? You're supposed to be doing some stupid shit with NASA or something." I'm pretty sure he thought I was interviewing for the same job because he was acting like I was competition throughout the interview. I was even asking questions like, "This is the problem. How would you go about handling it?" He still wasn't getting it. His answer was, "Well, I don't know how you said you'd do it, but I'd." So the interview is ending early. He didn't even do well enough for us to take him to lunch and see how he did during the "let's hang out and talk about the bullshit we like to do." All the other guys/girl in the room look at me and I said, "Alright. Thanks for coming up for an interview, guy who was a bully to nerds, but I just don't think you're the kind of material we want on this dev team. Go out, get some experience, and we'll see if we can work something out in the future." His eyes get wide, and he goes slack-jawed. Wait, and suddenly the light bulb turns on. He goes into a defensive, "You've got to hire me. I spent 6 years in college for this, for a 4-year degree, by the way, not anything beyond." It went on like that for a few moments, and then he started getting aggressive. "Well, what the hell are you doing here? What experience do you have?" I simply said, "Remember when I got out of high school early? Well, I've been doing this. Oh, and a brief stint in crypto/intel for the military. That was some good stuff, but my guys here missed me. So I had to come back for my homies." Then he went through a stage of entitlement. "Blah blah, you have to hire me. I have a degree in blah and you can't do this to me. Blah blah." I ask him to leave, and we are walking him out. As he's leaving, he tells me to fuck off, to which I say, "Well, best of luck to you. You'd be surprised who knows me, by the way." Well, in the time I was in the Navy, some former co-workers relocated and started working at other companies. When he applied to them, they noticed he was from my hometown and my age, so I was asked if I knew anything about him. To the best of my knowledge, he was rejected as not being good enough at Midway, High Voltage, EA, LA and Montreal, Ubisoft, A2M, Blizzard, and Sony Online Entertainment. I recently heard through a friend of a friend via Facebook that he's teaching at an Inuit school somewhere in northern Canada. Telling this story fills me with jollies. He was one of the few people that really made me wish I had a doomsday device when I was younger. When I was in 4th grade, a kid on the playground pulled my pants down in front of all the girls, underwear and all. I was already going through puberty early, so given the crazy hormones going on, this was about the most embarrassing thing that could have happened until the aftermath. Most kids teased me a bit. However, one girl who I had a crush on started basically bullying me about it. She would bring it up all the time, long after everyone else had basically forgot about it. She wouldn't let me. To the point where I altered my behavior to avoid her for fear she'd say something again and make me relive it. I think probably the most extreme thing I did was walk to school half hour instead of taking the bus, just because I knew she'd be on it. I was so happy that when middle school came, she was sent to another school. Thankfully, time helped me forget. Then when I was in high school and at a party, probably grade 10 or so, I saw her with some friends and I of course flashed back to those OFAC thoughts, even though it was so long past. Of course she came up to me, and of course, when we were talking just the two of us, she brought up the fact I was pants those years before. No one else could hear, thankfully, but it was still like my worst childhood fear coming true. Thankfully, at that moment, things took a bit of a turn for the good, I guess. She said the reason she teased me about it so much was that she had always had the biggest crush on me, and then she used some smooth line like, "That hasn't changed," or "I want to see it again." I was seeing red though, so I don't remember exactly what she said, and it took a minute to register she was basically hitting on me. And truth was, she was actually kinda hot at that point. Anyways, there is no glory story after that. I didn't take her in the back and shag and spank her to make her pay for making my younger life hell. I think I basically awkwardly excused myself. But it was some kinda faked up. Not a high school story, but a good one nonetheless. I was just barely out of HS working as a busboy at a high traffic restaurant. There was this one server, Jeff, who completely had it in for me. He and his wife, who worked there too, would openly make nasty, mocking, and often racist remarks about me to anyone who would listen, and often to my face. They would try to rally other team members to get me fired, steal from me by withholding my tip cuts, which was part of my pay. It was brutal working with them. Honestly, I wasn't a great busboy, but I didn't deserve that kind of treatment at all. Cut to approximately 10 years later. I had been working as a software engineer for years by then. I hadn't thought about that as hat in at least that long. I was taking my family to Disney World, and we had stopped at a breakfast buffet place before heading into the parks. And as I was walking my son to get pancakes or some such thing, Jeff hustles by right in front of me on his way to clear plates off of a dirty table. And there it was. It was a quite sad moment for me. My life had moved on, and I had made something of myself. But old Jeffy was still hustling for tips. Mind you, I have nothing but respect for people in food services. I did it for over 8 years. It's not easy, and it certainly is not lucrative. But for one moment I saw him for what he truly was. A person with no prospects, no options, no future. I didn't say anything. I finished my breakfast and left a nice tip. Those folks depend on them. This will get buried, but I'd like to share. Growing up I was always in sports. Football and baseball like the majority of young boys, but my favorites were boxing and wrestling. When MMA became available to me, I jumped at the opportunity. By high school I had been training for about 3 years. We had a linebacker named Nathan. Typical jock douche to everyone smaller, would try to bro it up with people he thought were his equal, and was a total asshole to every girl he would date. His favorite pastime, as far as I could tell, was punching the underclassmen in the balls and creepily hitting on the freshman girls. When we became seniors, he was kicked off the football team by the coaches for a laundry list of reasons. thus giving him more free time to torment the physically weaker guys. That is until one day he walked into our MMA gym to learn UFC. After a few weeks his athletic ability was enough to where our trainer put him in against some of the vets. Mostly just combos against focus mitts and Thai pads. He wasn't bad, but very sloppy, and tried to make every punch a knockout shot. He tried to talk to me a few times, but I feigned exhaustion, so I wouldn't have to speak much. A month goes by, and we get paired up as sparring partners. Full MMA rules, full contact and 3 rounds of 3 minutes each. Time to make him feel what it's like, being the frail one. I toyed with him at first, landing crisp jabs to his eyes, while following up with round kicks to his leg. He would later walk out of the gym hobbling on his only good leg left to him. Round 2 starts, and I decide to take him down. He spends the next 3 minutes off his back with me making him eat leather. By this time he is done. All the fight is out of him, and he just spits out his mouthpiece in defeat. MMA/Muay Thai session is over, and he leaves before the jiu-jitsu session can begin. My trainer yells at me for going too rough on him, until I tell him why. He still chews Myers out after Nathan quit the gym for the money he cold made off of another potential long-term student. Like Aldo Rain, I've been chewed out before. It was worth it. My roommate a few years later was one of his many victims, and while what I did wouldn't make a difference, we both felt like at least some sort of justice/karma got him back. I used to get bullied in high school quite often. But the worst was when a group of grade 9 guys started picking on me. I was in grade 11. I was super skinny, flat chested, and had the glasses, braces, acne and all the wrong clothes. They would constantly corner me in the halls and call me names, throw food at me in the cafeteria and basically make my life hell on a daily basis. Fast forward to me at 23. I'm at a bar in my hometown. I had moved away, and I had since lost the braces, grew some boobs, my skin cleared up, I had generally blossomed. One of my former bullies approaches and starts chatting me up, telling me I'm looking real good and all that. At first I figure he's being nice to make up for the crap he put me through in high school. Then I realize he has no idea who I am. Doesn't recognize me at all. So he asks me my name, and I run off a list of all the names him and his cronies used to call me. He looks puzzled and stunned, and I say guess it's been a while since high school, huh Jason? He just stammers and laughs and says shit, you've really changed since then. I look him up and down disapprovingly and say you sure haven't and walk away. T6,000 comments. This will probably get buried, but here it goes. In middle school I was your stereotypical loner type. I was overweight. Looking back, not overweight by today's standards, and I was shy. Friends didn't come easy, but I never really felt lonely. I became really good at entertaining myself. And a lot should be contributed to me imagination, which practically got me through school. It started as early as kindergarten. I vividly remember sneaking rocks into school and burying them in a particular area of the playground, which at that time had sand. I did this because I would enact stories in my head about how each rocks were tanks or spaceships, etc. But this was every day. I had my one little corner with my rocks and my sand. I even broke out of the playground to grab an awesome looking rock I wanted to use across the street and snuck it back in to play with. Then came elementary and middle school. I remember those days vividly. I had a particular tree that I would spend my time at during breaks. I was not a big fan of reading, writing, art, sports, and so I worked with what I had. This particular tree had a largely segmented trunk, about chest height. I used small sticks that I found beneath the tree and used them by wedging them in between the branches. Using enough with the right sizes, I managed to create cool little walls, forts, and generally little structures within the tree. This is where my story starts to come to context. Joel, another student of the same age, who was a good foot shorter than I was, but an ego twice his size, and 5 times my own. Without fail he would come up to me. Every day. He would hit me. He would call me names. You're the fattest person on the planet. Nice tigs, fattest worthless piece of shit. You get it. And every day, he would come over and break my structures in my tree. He made sure I watched. He would only do this when I was there. He would throw the sticks in my face and call me a worthless fattus. hit me repeatedly, and he would leave, laughing, loving what he has done. I hated him. There was nothing I hated more. Every day without fail this routine would continue. But I would always rebuild. I would always rebuild. I would cry. Sometimes for the rest of break. But come the next day, I would always rebuild. This is the only thing that kept my hatred inward. In fact, at the time I don't even think I hated him. I feared him. I hated him because he made me afraid. But I would always rebuild. Eventually I transferred out of the school district when we graduated, and I went to a different high school than most of my classmates. This was because the high school in my school district didn't have a band, and I wanted to be involved in a concert band. The getting away factor was a plus, but did not drive that decision. High school was great. I eventually found a group of friends I really connected with, and now, 5 years later I'm still best friends with a good portion of my high school friends. I was in band, I got good grades, I was senior prom king, and I had amazing friends. College came and went. I was in no way the same man I was when I was in middle school. I was more outward with people, and I was more social. I still grew tired and exhausted of socializing, so I spent much time alone, always thinking of the day I would run into one of my old bullies. What I would say, what I would do. Would I shout from the rooftops about what a new man I was and how I wasn't going to take his shit any longer? Would I hit him? Would I avoid the situation? How could I know? I met him in a grocery store. We recognized each other instantly. We walked over to each other, my heart racing, pumping, fueled by a hatred driven by a long-dwelling fear of the past. That smug look on his face, his short faking stature, his eyes that only saw pain to my flesh and my memories. He hugged me. He asked how I was doing and that it was really good to see me. I was speechless. With every ounce of my being I looked into whatever soul I thought might inhabit that husk and looked for any sign that he was disingenuous. Nothing. This son of a bitch was actually glad to see me. Like a long lost best friend lost at sea, finally to return home to his faithful childhood friend. He was happy. I wanted him to be in as whole. I wanted him to be the man I once feared. I wanted to rebuild, but nothing was destroyed but my predispositions. What do I do now? A man who brought torment to me has no recollection that he had left such a scar on my flesh that even a rebirth of a person's persona could heal. What do I rebuild now? I used to work in a milk bar, Australia, like a mom and pop corner shop for you Yanks, and this goofy looking kid used to come in who was being relentlessly bullied by this other kid. I could see this from the kids hanging around outside the shop. They were all about 10 years old. I went out of my way to be nice to this bullied kid. I used to slip him lollies, candies, when he came in, to get milk and bread and stuff like that. Finally I saw this one kid bully him right outside the shop before coming in and there was no one else around. The kid had been sent by his parents to get bread and milk. He said, "I'd like a liter of milk thanks," and I said no. He said, "What do you mean no?" I said, "I'm not going to serve you. No one in this shop is going to serve you because you're a bully." He said, "What?" I said, "I've seen you bullying other kids, so you're not going to be able to buy anything from this shop again." He started getting upset and said, "What will I tell my parents?" I said, "Tell your parents that the lady in the shop won't sell you milk or bread because you're a bully." The kid left. I don't know whether he hung around till I'd finished my shift or what he did about getting bread and milk. Years later I was walking around when an intimidating guy in full leathers with a head covering helmet pulled up his flashy motorcycle in front of me. I thought, what the fuck? He took his helmet off, and it was the bullied kid, and he said, "Do you remember me?" "'Cause I remember you," and he said, "I'll always remember you, because you made my childhood better." I haven't had the chance to get petty revenge yet. I had 2 bullies since kindergarten class, and until I was 13 and switched school, every single day they would find some way to bully me. If I was dumb enough to bring something I liked with me to school, they would break it. They would do everything in their power to make my life a living hell, including a few memorable times in which they managed to get my entire class involved in bullying me. Beat me up, steal stuff from me, especially funny after pet, hiding my clothes while I was in the shower, all sorts of shit. I was bullied to a point where I honestly considered waiting for the main bully somewhere out of school with my baseball bat and ambushing him. This was a good few years before Columbine, but if I'd had access to a gun back then, I'd have shot the faker and laughed. One of the bullies I kinda got payback on the 2 years before I switched schools. This would be the main bully. I started playing basketball on the same team my bully was on. At that point, we were about the same height, but he was a fat faker and I was regular sized. The coach would put us on opposing teams and make sure that we were guarding each other. Not sure if that's the correct term in English. I'd run circles around the faker, and the few times he tried to bully me at basketball training, the coach would punish him. But what kind of way is that to treat your teammate? That was faking gold. A few years later, I met him again. This time, I was with my girlfriend. By now we are close to our 11th anniversary. Let's just say I scored above my stand. Hot summer day, we met him, still a fatus, wearing short shorts, and generally looking like a hick. Didn't say shit to him, just gave him a smug smile, with my girlfriend on my arm. There were 2 main bullies. I've sworn to piss on their graves, and that's something I intend to do. They're shitty people, and thanks to them, I've had problems with depression, low self-worth and just in general hating many things about myself. The lowest point was when I almost killed myself. Semi-funny story. For some reason, fuck knows why, my old class decided to invite me to their reunion 5 years back, telling them on Facebook that I would rather skin myself and jump in a pit of salt than voluntarily spend time with them ever again may have been one of the most satisfying things I've ever done for myself. When I was in elementary school there was this kid named Josh. He would pick on me, and he got suspended one day for punching me in the face. But every year we would end up in the same class together, so he would push me around and other stupid little things like that. Well, one day, when I was in 5th grade I went to the bathroom to take a piss and 2 other kids started to gang up on me and call me names for whatever reason. They back me into a corner, and as soon as they are about to whoop me Josh walks in. I'm thinking to myself, fuck, this is really about to suck. Josh asks the other kids what they are doing, and they tell him they are about to rough me up. So Josh walks right up to me, standing between me and the guys, and then turns to look at them right in the face, and proceeds to kick their ass. I couldn't believe what had just happened. When he gets done going ham he turns to me and apologized for the way he had treated me. This was in like 5th or 6th grade and I thanked him, and then walked away. He moved away the next year and I ran into him at a party a year or 2 ago and just gave him the most bro handshake I could. I thanked him for what he did, and that I never forgot that day. He said it was the least he could do for all the shit he did when he was younger. He is now an EMT worker and volunteer firefighter who saves lives every day. Technically I was still in high school, but it was the last day that our senior class was together. I was bullied all through high school by a group of about 6 guys. They were all shrimpy skateboarders that couldn't take anyone in a fight, so they bullied people verbally and sometimes through food and crap. I got the brunt of it because it was a small school and I was basically the only person who didn't have an itch since I had transferred in. Well, cut to the last time our class is together. On the last day of our senior trip, the class officers decided to do this thing where we would all sit in a circle around a giant pile of Hershey's Kisses. The idea was that you would get up, give a kiss to someone, and tell them why you were giving it to them. The very first guy to go was one of these bullies. And he walks over to me and in front of the entire class says, "I was a dick to you for absolutely no reason, and you're actually one of the most awesome people I know, and I feel stupid for ripping on you instead of getting to know you." I was not expecting it at all. Started crying. Not an all-out bawling episode, just a few tears. A couple minutes later, another one of the guys gets up and does the same thing. And then another. After the third guy went, I had to get up and leave the room because I was an emotional wreck and I was embarrassed. And then a fourth guy followed me out and apologized to me in the bathroom and stayed with me until I could go back. The other 2 guys never apologized. Funny thing is, the 4 guys that apologized to me have their lives on track, while the other 2 are college dropouts who live on their friends' couches. His will likely not be read, but here goes 3 guys specifically used to get under my skin. I was 6 feet in high school and played football, but was an Anabash geek. I shared a room, and often a bed with my male best friend, so the whole school pretty much assumed we were gay. Anyway, I used to have screaming matches, shoving matches, fist fights, etc. point with these guys. Here's what happened. Guy #1. A few months after high school I see him in a bar, and I plan on just ignoring him, but he comes by with a drink for me. Basically says, we should have been friends in high school and he always respected me, but his friends hated me. He gave into pressure, and he was a stupid kid, etc. Apologizes and says college really helped to sort him out. We cool. Guy #2. Near the end of school, he yanks on my hair so hard he nearly pulls me down. I turn around and hit him so hard he falls out of his chair and into the desk behind him. He stands back up, and the gym teacher just looks at him and says you deserve that. He was later expelled for drug possession on school grounds and trying to fight the cops that were arresting him. Went to jail, dropped off the face of the planet. Guy #3. This guy was the linchpin. He was a hockey kid and came from a rich family. Worst part about him was he was so likable. Hell, we even chilled sometimes, and after a game of floor hockey once, he wanted to recruit me into his team as a defenseman. He could turn on you so fast though. On another day, he threw some random insult my way and I kind of casually flipped him off and kept walking. He charged him and shoulder rushed me from behind, nearly snapped my neck and knocked me out. End of high school I have a huge bash and he shows up with 6 to 7 girls. Popular cheerleader types, but really friendly. Most people liked them. They volunteered for the special ed friends program, etc. He gets into a fight with my best friend, who's not a big guy. I tell him to knock it off, but he's at it again soon enough. I tell him to leave, and he looks about ready to get into it, but decides not to. He says come on girls. This party suck anyway. It didn't, but they huddle into a circle and say over there should know, we are gonna stay here. He got a full sports scholarship, tested positive for weed, coke, and steroids and lost it, and got expelled. He lives in a trailer, and is trying to kickstart a rap career in Alabama. I grew up in a small logging town, and never really fit in. One kid had it out for me all through high school, and I always just walked away from any antagonists. It was pretty brutal at times. I can remember him spitting on me, and trying to get a reaction and I just walked away. Well, I graduated, was picked up by a big tech company, moved away where I bought a new M3, and spent a good amount of money modifying it. http://img.photobucket.com/ for those that want to see. 3 or 4 years later I returned to home to visit my parents. I pulled into this old burger joint I used to go to and this guy comes walking out of the diner. I was kind of taken back for a second, because here I was dressed respectably, slacks, loafers, tie etc. point, and he's in a construction outfit. He's covered in dirt and filthy. There was a pause for a second as I realized the opportunity I had been presented with, and he realized who I was. I immediately leaned in with a big smile on my face, and acted like he was an old friend I hadn't seen in forever, shook his hand, and behaved like I was excited to see him. I asked how he was doing, and said it was good to see him, but I had to get going as I had an appointment to get to. Right before I walked in the door he realized which car I had gotten out of, and turned back to say, "Is that yours?" I shook my head in a yes notion and said yeah. It still had the California plates on it, so it was obvious I had moved on to better things. It couldn't have been more perfect as I had unknowingly parked right next to his same modified Honda he drove back in high school. It was cool at the time and I can remember girls getting all floozy over it. I can't say that I have dealt with this from a student yet, but I had a really shitty second grade year because of my English teacher, Ms. Wilson. This teacher was a real beach. She was 59 years old, real mean, and on her last year of teaching before she retired. She wanted to make some kid her beach. Consequently I was that kid. She did things to me that stuck with me in the academic sense for 6 years. Back when I was in the second grade I had a speech impediment. It was severe stuttering that was the result of an allergic reaction to a decongestant I had to take. You would think it was bad enough trying to go through school being made fun of by the students because of this, but she made it even worse. She off the bat did not like me. On the first day, called me out for not being a fast enough reader. I was faster than most kids, and ridiculed me for it. Throughout the year, whenever I didn't do well on something, she would make an example of me and told the other kids to not do as sexually motivated. After only few weeks into school, she decided to give the nickname of Stutter. I was very self-conscious of my speech impediment, but after she started calling me that, the entire class and eventually the entire school called me that. The day before we left for Christmas break, she decided to call me out in the fact that my desk was somewhat messy. But instead of telling me to organize it, she decided it would be great to throw my desk on the ground and say to me, "Pick it up, you little sheet," all the while the entire class laughed at me. Finally, to put the icing on the cake, at the end of the year, to fuck me over academically, she filled out a report that any elementary school teacher can fill out, which states that the teacher thinks the student is learning disabled. It is amazing how much power the teacher has in deciding whether a student should be placed into a special needs class. Whenever the principal would question something on the report, he would always disregard what my parents said and would always go off of what the teacher said. For the year after second, I was put into a special education course which I was not allowed to test out of. I got out of it from 4th grade and on, but the labels still follow me until high school. Fast forward 11 years from 2nd grade. I graduated from my high school in the top 5% and will be attending a university that is in the top 3% in the nation. This person never really left my mind because of how much she negatively affected on a social, mental, and academic way, which is why I decided to find out where she currently was. She in a home for the elderly only 20 minutes away. I decided to pay her a visit. Turns out she had some sort of cancer and only had a couple months to live. I told her that, because of what she did to me that year, it affected me so negatively that I was feeling the repercussions of it until high school. I told her where I was going to college and that I had actually made something of myself. She didn't say anything to me, not because she couldn't, but because she was ashamed of herself. I told her to have a great rest of her short life and that I will be enjoying mine. It made me feel good to know that I had risen above what she got me into. There was a guy who was somewhat cruel and the epitome of cool for a 1990s high schooler. He was gangster kid, complete with clothes, persona, and ubiquitous tag, and was the kid of very rich, very famous parents. I bet there were a lot of Oscars and Emmas in that house. Whatever, he was a rich kid douchebag white guy wanting to be black. I don't remember him being outwardly cruel to me, but he was in my 9-person homeroom and a lot of my classes all 4 years, and he seemed more than happy to collude in the totally socially isolating me along with most of the rest of the school. I guess I picked him out because he was so intimidating on so many levels and had many opportunities to treat me like I at least existed, which he declined. 20 years later, we are at our high school reunion. He buys me a huge whiskey and we actually have a great conversation. Turns out he is really exceptionally smart. At some point he says, "You know, this is what a reunion should be about. Talking to someone you always thought was really cool, but never got the chance to hang out with. I guess we both should have given each other more of a chance." Bonus story, the guy who I was madly in love with and hooking up with my senior year, but would never deign to actually date me in public or even admit we were really dating to me or himself, told me at the same reunion that he had been consumed with regret at not marrying me. He went on to say that he had come to terms with it because my career was too dynamic. I guess he googled me and he needed a stay-at-home wife. His wife was about 3 feet away when he said this. Like I said, this guy was never even my boyfriend, so it was strange to hear, but good to know in a way. I was never a big kid. I was smaller and different. That made me everyone's target. When I was in grade 8, there was this kid named Daryl, a fat, mean little bastard who loved nothing more than tormenting those who couldn't defend themselves. Most of the time it was just teasing. I was called every name you can imagine. Sometimes, that wasn't enough for him. He lived on inflicting misery and suffering. It nourished him. So he would wait after recess for one of us in the boys' room. That was when he would get his real kicks. He broke my wrist once and hit me into a wall hard enough that my right eye has never really recovered. The teachers never believed us. We'd tell what happened and he'd just smile this sheet-eating grin and say I don't know what happened. I was hanging up my coat. He always got off. That was until one morning in November. There was a kid a year younger than us who had gay parents. That set Daryl off. He beat that kid and beat him and beat him. The bell went off and he was late for class. The principal heard the commotion in the bathroom and caught Daryl, covered in the kid's blood. He had beaten him so bad he put the kid in a coma. Daryl was expelled and his parents moved to another district to get him back in school. That was when I lost track of him. His attacks and insults have never left my mind. When I hit high school, I took up bodybuilding and found I had a natural talent for intimidation. After graduation, I become a security guard. Fast forward, and I'm 38. I end up a guard working death row. We get a bunch of prisoners transferred from upstate, and there, in an orange jumpsuit and manacles, is Daryl. It took everything I had to keep from beating the shit out of him right then and there. That was when I found out that Daryl had a week to live. When he was 25, he raped and murdered a boy. I smiled to myself, watching him shuffle by. I was working the morning they stuck him with that needle. I walked by his cell, wearing his faking sheet-eating grin, and said to him, "You're late for class, Daryl." Way late on this, but here goes. When I was in elementary school I was picked on a lot. I nerdy, wore out of style hand-me-downs, and had teeth that stuck out. In addition, my dad was an alcoholic, and kids knew that I had no backup. No matter what they did I was on my own. There was one little boy I had a crush on. It was my first crush, and I'm sure I wasn't terribly subtle. So imagine my delight when he handed me a note on the bus. The note said that he liked me, asked if I liked him, and asked for a reply. When I handed it back to him, yes, I liked him, he stood up and read it in front of the whole bus. All the kids on the bus cracked up, and he carried on bullying and teasing me about it for the rest of the year. He never missed an opportunity to tell me that he could never like a girl as ugly as me in front of as many people as possible. On the last day of school, he finished up by getting his brother to hold my arms down while he beat me up. So I was quite happy to learn that sometime over the summer he moved, but I never forgot the humiliation of my first crush. Flash forward to 14 years later. The puberty fairy had been kind to me, and a judicious set of braces had straightened up my teeth. I was in college and waiting tables at a popular club that was well known for its hot waitresses and skimpy outfits. One night this rather unattractive guy comes to my section along with his friend. They spend the evening flirting with me and trying to pick up women with little success. I keep looking at the guy and thinking he looks familiar for some reason, but I can't place him. Then his friend says his name, and it dawns on me that he is my first crush. I continue to serve them all night and deliver drinks to girls around the bar for them. Neither one of them is successful, and by the end of the night they are looking discouraged. So he looks at me and says, "We are going to an after hours bar. When we leave here, would you like to come with us?" I flash him my biggest smile and agree to go. After I close out for the night, they are left sitting there as the bar starts to empty. As we were cashing out, I tell several of the waitresses what he had done to me all those years ago. So they all gather around when I announce that I changed my mind about going to the after hours bar with them. I would never be seen with someone as ugly as him. They all cracked up, especially when I stuck my teeth out and told him my name. The look on his face when he realized who I was priceless. And to top it all off, we did wind up at the same after hours bar, but I was there with my group of hot cowwalkers and a really cute guy I was seeing at the time. He and his friend left shortly after we arrived. So there was this girl in high school who was very popular with the boys and thought every boy wanted her, you know, the blonde twiggy anorexic beach that found meaning in giving HJS to her classmates in the boys' bathroom. This girl and I were in several classes together, and she always found joy picking on me for my acne, or cracking voice or lanky build. Anyways, story time. I work as a server at a pub-style restaurant, and I was not that busy one day, so I decided to run/deliver some drinks from the bar to other servers' tables. As I'm handing out the drinks to these 5 ladies, one of them says, "Oh my god, hi Farley 947, how have you been?" It's her. Now, I try to be civil and just get the hell out of there, since it's not my table, but she asked how I was doing, and if I still hung out with anyone from high school. I told her I don't really hang out with anyone from high school, there are maybe 5 people I would ever want to see again. She kind of giggled, and jokingly said, "I bet one of them is me." Instead of playing along, I just answered honestly. I said, "No, you were never nice to me." I had a pretty good one. So about a year ago I start college. I was in the Marines from 06 to 11, so once I got out I decided to go back and get my degree. My first winter break, I decide to head back home and crash there for 2 weeks. I grew up in a really small town, and everybody there is family friends, and they still hang out, and everybody really knows each other, etc. So a lot of people went to a really big house for a happy holidays type party, and how big parties usually go, everybody hangs out with people their own age. I'm drinking, so is everybody else, so I'm being a little more social than usual. Instead of off by myself like normal, I'm in a big group of guys I knew from high school. There was a guy in the group who was a huge dick to everybody always, and of course he asks me, "We are the same age, right?" I reply, "Yeah." "Oh, so you never went to college?" And he starts bursting out into laughter along with his squad of douche nozzles. At this point I'm a little buzzed, and quite honestly way more pissed than I should have been. Great combo. So fuck him, right? Yeah, you're right. I don't have a degree. Instead of faking girls and drinking every night while Myrich's parents pay for it, I spent 5 years and 1 6-month deployment in the Marines. But, you know, if you have a problem with me being dumb, we can take this outside. I hate playing the bad as Rambo soldier card, but he was asking for it. And it was really funny. Like he almost shit his pants. Does the whole bullshit no, "Thanks for your service" thing civvies do? I laugh and ignore him the rest of the night. Fast forward to now. I'm 1 year into a nuclear engineering degree and he's probably a gym teacher somewhere. TLDR, was in the Marines. Some guy insults me for not going to college. Made him cry. Won at life. There was this kid in my town who constantly bullied and picked on me. From the 3rd grade up. Finally in 7th grade, after years of getting pushed down and punched in the gut, I called the kid out in history class. He started to say something, but the teacher walked in. Next class we had math and sat at the same table. He punched me in the chest, and without thinking I clobbered him across his face. The fighting stopped after that for a while. Fast forward to freshman year in high school. I had started hanging out with the goths and the like. Said bully started picking on me and my friends. A few months later Columbine happens and everyone in the school is afraid of us for a few years except bully guy. He gets more and more brutal in his words and attacks. Fast forward again 4 years out of high school, I'm at a bar with some friends and bully guy comes up and apologizes and drunk says, "Anything I want, put on his tab." I accept his apology and proceed to run up his tab to well over $200. End of the night he sees it and looks at me and says, "Well, I guess I deserve that." Being the nice guy I'm with a large sum of money in my pocket, I pay the whole tab and invite him out to my landfall 8-night party and bonfire. We talked for a while, and it turned out he was physically abused as a kid and he took that out on smaller people and was genuinely sorry for that. We became good friends that night and have stayed that way since. I used to be a bully in high school. I didn't realize at the time, but I was. Me not realizing doesn't justify what I did, but it's important to mention as it only came to light recently how devastated the people were that I used to bully. To me, all I did was make jokes. As long as I got a laugh, I didn't care. I used myself as the punchline of many jokes, so I figured that everyone else felt the same way. I thought that, so long as what I said was a joke, then nobody would get hurt. Again, I'm not justifying what I did, I'm just showing how fucking ignorant I was. I added a guy from school on Facebook recently, and he messaged me this: "Why the fuck would I have you on Facebook? You ruined my life." At first I thought he was joking, so I asked what I did, and he wrote me another brief message: "You picked on me every day in school, you made me hate myself, fuck off, stop messaging me, fucking die." I haven't seen him for 10 years, and he still feels this way. still torn up, still emotionally faked from what I did. I asked a few of my high school friends what I was like, and they said I was a little bit of a dick from time to time, so I probed more, and they told me about a few incidents in school that I had forgotten about. I fucking forgot about them, and they ruined a kid's life. One incident was towards the guy that messaged me. He wore a hearing aid, so, like the scene in Fawlty Towers, I tried to get him to turn it up and then shout in his ear. He ignored me, so I just shouted anyway, faking dick move. What cunt does that? But at the time I was so focused on making everybody laugh I didn't even consider his feelings. I'm different now. I'm so faking different now. There isn't a way that I can prove this to Reddit, but I swear I'm nothing like the cunt I was 10 years ago. I swear. It kills me to think about how many people might feel this way and I don't even know. There is nothing I can do. Even if I get given a list of people I faked over, they are scarred from my actions. Their deep-seated self-hate or confidence issues or social anxiety, I caused it, and I can't fix it. The worst this is that I don't remember all the events. I remember the people, I remember them all, but in my memory we are all laughing. So I can't just send out a blanket email. I can't ask random people if I bullied them. I just have to wait it out and hopefully someone else tells me that I was a cunt, a total faking cunt. In fact, that isn't the worst thing. The worst thing relates to this post. If anyone that I hurt in high school ever meets me, I'm doing perfectly. I've traveled the world, have a great job, a long-term girlfriend, no kids, no debt, I'm healthy, and I have lots of friends. There won't be any stories on here of revenge or justice. I just hope that a genuine, faking genuine, apology would suffice. That's all I can do. I'm so faking sorry. I live next to my bully now as an adult. Backstory: I, a guy, was incredibly short and scrawny all through high school, was picked on constantly, frequently beat up. I was quiet and kept my head down. Any day without an altercation was a good day. The worst though was the mental stuff. There was this gal who was honestly beautiful, real head cheerleader type. It got out that I liked her. Well, she wasn't having a spaz like me on the playing field. She made sure I knew she would never be with a guy like me, and her main man on the football team made sure I never forgot by beating me up on a semi-weekly basis. Well, I survived high school like most people and moved on to college, where suddenly skills like knowing how to read, playing guitar, suddenly becoming tall and handsome after late blooming are awarded. Much later, after I'd gone through my bachelor's degree and master's, my wife and I moved into a tiny little house in the city, and wouldn't you know it, our next door neighbor is the cheerleader. We share a wall in the townhouse. We can hear everything that goes on in their house and they can hear everything in ours, presumably. Sometimes I turn off the TV in my living room and just sit in silence, so I can hear her kids screaming at the top of their lungs, or her husband yell that he can't find his keys, or that she hasn't done the dishes. I can hear her 3 dogs barking when the ups man comes to the door, and then later her husband yelling that she spends all his money. But I don't do that often. I honestly don't spend a lot of time thinking about my neighbor/bully, but when I do, what I'm far more pleased by is when they can hear me never yelling about money with my beautiful, talented, and brilliant doctor wife, or when they can hear us chuckle to ourselves when our gracefully aging friends are over and one of them tells a clever anecdote, or when we listen to jazz records and clink highball glasses with expensive bourbon in them. I went to a small, all-boys, boarding school for high school. As one can imagine, the hazing/bullying was like high school on crack. Imagine your nemesis lives 20 feet away from you for 9 months a year and you'll begin to understand. I had one guy, we'll call him Steven, that decided I was his beach my freshman year. He was 6 feet 2 inches and 18 from being held back a year. I was 5 feet 6 inches and 120 pounds, so yeah, that was fun. Anyway, our school has a fairly tight-knit alumni community and the school will give shitty, almost no pay jobs to the fuck-ups that can't hack it in the real world. Think landscaping for a room, board, and $200 a month stipend. They also are the ones they get to man the phones for the yearly donation calls. So about 4 years after I graduate, I get a call from the school asking for donations. They were broke as fuck. And lo and behold, it's Steven used to shove me into radiators, so I needed staples twice and stitches once, and now have 3 scars in my scalp forever on the other end. I know that this guy is pushing 30, can't hold a faking job, and is living in a tiny drafty room the size of most broom closets, eating shitty cafeteria food every day. The food was god awful, and is hauling in around $2,500 a year. I asked him what genius thought it would be a good idea to have me on his call sheet, and how much joy it brought me to know he was a total factored. Maybe a little late on the bus here, but let's give it a whirl. This kid had picked on me since I was in 3rd grade and first got my glasses. Typical 4 eyes bullshit, but eventually it got physical, and he broke my glasses at school. Fast forward into high school and the kid's in alternative education classes, still getting into fights, but he's picking on my friends in addition to me. 5 years after graduation, I went to my neighbor's daughter's college graduation party and sure as shit, there he was. So that night, we are all hanging around drinking some beers, and then he sees my neighbor's guitar lying around. He grabs it and fumbles through some Johnny Cash tunes. He goes to put it down, and I ask him to pass it to me. I go over to the amp and crank the gain up to 8 and proceed to play Metallica's Ride the Lightning. The dude's jaw literally dropped. After I was done, he came up to me and said he was sorry for bullying me as a kid and didn't know I was cool, etc. I brushed it off like it was no big deal, but it felt good. I went to shake his hand and gave him a solid handshake, and he winces in pain. Apparently he had just had a cast removed from his arm 2 days prior. My maths teacher that I had between ages 14 to 16 was a draconian as whole, who took a disliking to me because I was good at maths, but hated it. Me and about 25 other kids did our GCSE exams 2 years early because we had the ability and the school wanted to show off. However, after this, we basically had 4 free periods a week that the teachers didn't know what to do with. The easiest option was to make us all do a maths A level early too. Given that I hated math and only had to do it to GCSE, I was not keen on continuing. So, after his whole teacher announces to us we are being forced into doing A-level math, I think no way and stay behind after the lesson to tell him what I thought of it. I said I'd prefer to spend my extra 4H a week doing an art qualification, since that was what I was most interested in. He said something that has always stuck in my mind and still makes me angry. He said, "Peel on a string, you are never going to get anywhere in life because you are as stubborn as a mule and you think you're above everybody. Everybody is going to dislike you for it. I'm not asking you to do the A level, I'm telling you. Now get out." Needless to say, I started skipping math class, hiding at the back of the school library behind loads of stacks, and doing my artwork. After my mum got a load of angry letters home about my truancy, I came clean and showed everybody what I had been up to. I was submitted for the art qualification and got the highest grade in the year. I now study the history of art at Oxford University. I ran into this asshole of a teacher about 6 months ago, just before I was about to return to uni. He asked me where I was, and I said Oxford. He looked shocked. I then said as my parting shot, so I guess being stubborn and following what I wanted to do ended up getting me pretty far, didn't it? I don't know if he remembered what he said to me that time, but speaking as a ginormous nerd, it was the most badass I've ever felt. TLDR, his whole math teacher tries to stop me studying art, which was my passion. I end up studying art at one of the best universities in the world. Boom. I got picked on quite badly in school, and it was mostly led by these 2 boys. Both of them had difficult family situations, so I guess that's where their need to take it out on me stemmed from. One of them I last saw about 6 months after leaving the school. It was very awkward and there was no big confrontation or anything. Facebook tells me he's now an actor in Spain. His mother was Spanish. I last saw the other one at a highway Burger King. I was doing service in the Danish emergency management and was in uniform and with a bunch of friends on our way back to barracks after the weekend. I remember sitting there eating my food and spotting him in the line and being very conflicted about whether to talk to him. I seriously didn't know what to say. I had heard that his parents had gotten divorced and his father was drinking too much. To spare myself the awkwardness, I just ignored him. I don't know if he saw me. Perhaps he did and chose to ignore me too. A few years later he was killed in a car accident at the age of 24. His friend was driving the car, perhaps drunk, way too fast. They ran off the road and hit a tree and my old bully was killed instantly, while the driver walked away without a scratch. Though it affected me a lot at the time, I bear no hard feelings for either of them, and I don't feel his death had anything to do with karma. Sometimes I do think how strange it is that a guy my age that I used to know is now dead. Growing up in a smaller town and being fairly disconnected with my classmates in high school, my outside activities didn't facilitate very normal social interaction. Really all I wanted to do was play magic and skateboard, both of which I was really good at. The few skateboarders I did know had a different lunch period than me, so I was left with another group of skaters that weren't very nice. Enter Charlie. To understand Charlie is to understand King Jeffrey. Short sniveling brat of a kid that chose to spend his time singling me out in order to make himself feel better. Coupled with my extremely volatile home life, and it was by far the worst 3 years of my life. Fast forward 10 plus years and I've since left all that behind. Found an amazing group of core friends, a great job in the video game industry along with a renewed sense of self. The re-meeting of Charlie was something that hit me like a ton of bricks and sent my mind spiraling. I was going to see the Amazing Spider-Man with a few friends, and on the way to our theater, we stopped for some snacks. I asked for a cherry icy, only to hear Charlie from around the other side of the counter say they were out. He then walks over, looks me dead in the eye, and tells me there's only blue raspberry left. The shock of seeing this person that so thoroughly terrorized years of my life was enough to make my jaw drop. 10 years of life later, he's working behind the counter of a local movie theater telling people about the current status of the iced beverage machines, while I'm making video games, living on my own and flourishing. Bullies happen, but mine were a pair of them. No revenge. Nothing that heady. Just one final message from across the room. In middle school I was fat. 2 guys 1 grade ahead of mine decided one day to call me basketball. They used a whining, lilting falsetto that I can still hear. Not sure what about the tone set me off. I had dealt with being the fat kid for years and had developed a thick skin, so I thought. Well, after a few weeks of hearing them launch the diatribe each time I was around, I decided to do something, anything to shut them up. I confronted them and asked why they chose me to torment when there were other prey to choose from. I did not get a straight answer and they asked me what I would do about it. I called one of them out after school, the short one that I thought I might have a chance against. We met at a local city park. They brought about 7 other guys to watch. I did not tell any of my friends about this and was alone. I was not proud that I had been goaded into such stupidity. I knew nothing about fighting and was pummeled by the one guy until I just gave up and they let me go home. Beautiful purple, fading to yellow bruises. Had to tell people various stories, but would not tell anybody but my closest friends at the time what had happened. All those guys went on to high school. I went on to my last year at middle school. Ugly ducklings and fat boys can change a lot in just 2 years. Fast forward to high school gym class. I had been riding bicycles a lot, grew few inches, and looked kinda big. Not tall, just bigger in the arms, chest and legs than most guys my age. Then I started lifting. I had gotten very strong and could move more weight as a freshman than most seniors. First day of weight training pec class. These 2 clowns show up. Of course they recognize me. They do not talk to me. They try to pretend I'm not there as I start to do my regular routine around the circuit. They watched me pump off 10 reps using the stack at leg press, then I moved to the bench for my set. I looked over and grinned at both of them while easily bench pressing the equivalent of one of their sorry asses. They never ever looked me in eyes the next 3 years of high school and quickly found other places to be whenever I was around. Finally, I have a story worth telling. During my freshman year of high school, I was taking a 0-hour class, a class that starts before the normal school session, on account of a seminary class I was taking during the normal class hours. I was quite tired one morning and a sophomore approached me after my 0-hour class and told me, "You look high as fuck." I gave him an awkward look because I, at this point in my life, was quite unfamiliar with what I could imply. He then asked, "Did you drink the bong water too?" I again gave him another awkward look as I sheepishly muttered, "What?" He replied, "Don't drink the bong water, man. Don't drink it." That's all I really remember from our first encounter, but every single time I saw him during passing periods or during lunch, he would tell me, "Don't drink the bong water. Don't drink it." I was pretty impressed with his persistence. Fast forward to 6 years after high school, haven't seen this guy in what, 7 or 8 years. It's late at night, I'm cruising through the Jack in the Box drive-thru to pick up some tacos. I arrive at the window and lo and behold, our eyes meet, his face lights up with glee, and I hear the words, "Don't drink the bong water, man, don't drink it." I probably looked like a deer caught in the headlights, just because I never once expected this, especially after 8 years. The persistence and dedication of this gentleman astounds me. At the same time I'm perplexed as to why he's working at Jack in the Box. TLDR, high school bully persistently offering friendly advice. When I was 13 I was around 80 kilograms, 176 pounds. I'd always been overweight, but I was a very social kid who didn't have trouble making friends. Because of this I found myself in the cool group and there was this one kid who I considered a close friend with him, and I pretty much ran the social group. One day out of the blue another kid from this group told me in front of everyone, "You realize no one likes you, right? You're fat and ugly and everyone feels sorry for you." Everyone started laughing and hurling abuse at me, and I was beyond unconsolable. My social group had gone to shit, and I had no one else. Turns out I somehow had gotten on the bad side of the guy who I considered a friend, and he had warped everyone's opinion, and like a good herd of sheep they followed along, because they didn't want to get on his bad side. I didn't really have anyone else. I had friends, but not the type you would sit with. I honestly thought I could just tough it out, and it would eventually pass and everyone would quickly treat me as before. I was stupid to think it would work. I was physically and emotionally bullied for weeks. The whole group made a point of making my life hell, just because he said so. They'd embarrass me in class, get me in trouble, start chants on the school bus, hide my stuff, you name it, they did it. I became a shell of my former self to the point a couple of my teachers actually rang my parents and asked if I was okay. Because I didn't want to admit to my folks what was happening, I just bottled it up. After a particularly bad day of coping abuse I came home in tears, and I found myself in the kitchen with a knife against my wrist digging into the skin. I held it there for a while trembling and repeating over and over, "You don't want to do this. You don't want to do this." It's like my mind was in a battle with my body. Common sense prevailed, and I dropped the knife and vowed to move on. I sat by myself for a good couple months after that, making a point of finding somewhere where they couldn't find me. I found this one place under the auditorium where there was this bench and I would eat my lunch in darkness listening to everyone else laughing and playing outside wishing it was me. It took a while, but I made new friends and things eventually got better. A couple years later the kid got actually expelled for abusing a teacher and I somehow found myself slowing getting dragged back into the old social group. Things were different, but I never forgot what they did. Fast forward to about a fortnight ago, and I was working out at the gym when I noticed in the corner of my eye this dude looking at me. It turned out to be that guy who made my life hell trying to figure out who I was. The past couple years I've started taking my physique seriously, and I'm aiming to eventually compete. The look on his face when he realized the overweight kid whose life he made hell was now much bigger than him was priceless. I did eventually walk over and say hello, and he couldn't make himself look me in the eyes once. I didn't need any petty payback, just knowing he was intimidated was enough. Long story. We'll try to condense. I was picked on mercilessly in middle school, as many were. I was attending a private school for 7th grade and did not mesh well with my fellow students. I was on scholarship, I acted weird, and I was coming from a classroom experience that was very friendly and didn't present a lot of social challenges. I was a fucking nerd, basical, and I mean that in the best way possible. So I got beat on a lot. They called me Minnie in response to an unfortunate incident in which I was observed skipping across a field, wearing a Minnie Mouse t-shirt, and singing Santa Claus is Coming to Town. I would say there are regrets, but frankly that could happen tomorrow and be consistent with my personality. So I got dead arms, taunted, beaten more severely a few times. Just your standard late 80s bullying. Probably caught a bloody nose or two. And more importantly, school was just sucking. So at the end of the year I transferred to public school and life started to get better. Flash forward to senior year of high school. I had become a bit of a bad kid, I guess, by which I mean I was getting poor grades, missing lot of school, and of course taking soft drugs, and drinking and whatnot. I had become cool, I guess, for some value of that. Point is, I got invited to parties and all of that good stuff. And I was at a party up in Maine, I'm from Mass, and was at my summer house at a random beach fire on a Nordeuben reservation. I was drinking a beer hanging out when all of a sudden I hear a voice coming toward the fire from down the beach yell, "Holy shit, it's Minnie." It was one of the principal offenders from 7th grade. Let's call him Ham, because I just ate a delicious ham sandwich. Ham was really excited to see me. Sam was pretty drunk. Sam was not friends with a lot of the people at the party. I was. I played it off legit, though. I was friendly and smiled and shook his hand while I thought about what I could do to make his life suck a little. We got to talking, and it turned out he was really looking hard for some smoke or something like that. He was using like a complete narc word, but wanted to smoke weed. As it happened, I had some really unbelievably stellar weed. And this was in '92 when it wasn't in ready supply, and most people at that age were used to mids or Mexican brown weed. The particular joint I had on me also had a snake of glass opium running through the middle. It was a Jeffrey, basically. So I told Ham I had a joint, and we could go smoke it, just the two of us. I didn't want to share. He did his best drunk covered look around and agreed, and I led him up the beach and into the Nordeuben Rees. We walked pretty far into the woods, and he was not familiar with the area. And as I lit the joint and started passing it, I kept walking farther in, turning a lot. There is a maze of paths in the woods, and I knew them very well, having played there my whole childhood. Finally we finished the joint. We are like almost a mile away from the fire in the middle of the woods. It is pitch black. I tell Ham I have to go home and point in the opposite direction of the party and tell him that's where it is. Then I walk away really fast. He was too baked to know what was going on. He got lost for 12 hours. Not the greatest revenge in the world, but it settled well with me. The popular guy from high school messaged me on an online dating site the other day. Here's his profile. Myself summary: I'm new to town. He's not new to town and just trying to make some friends. I'm a nice guy. So girls, if you want someone who will listen to your feelings and not be an asshole, I'm your guy. I like to party. I'm alpha male. What I'm doing with my life: just chilling out. Sometimes I drywall. I'm really good at hip hop. The first thing people usually notice about me, that I'm 5 feet 8 inches. Also my eyes, which are like really blue. Favorite books, movies, shows, music and food: The Secret, bacon, pizza. Lol. 6 things I can never do without bacon: pizza, beads, sech. Lol. iPhone, bed. I spend a lot of time thinking about why girls only want to date assholes on a typical Friday night. I'm clubbing, the most private thing I'm willing to admit. That's gay. Lol. You should message me if you're hot. You like alpha guys. You're looking for a long-term boyfriend. You're not a player. I was bullied for 2 years by a girl named JS. She terrorized me. Finally, in March of her senior, my junior year, I could not take it anymore. She always cornered me after homeroom when we passed each other in the hallway. Usually she called me names and threatened to kick my ass. This day I woke up and decided I was done. As she came around a corner, I swerved to meet her. She was surprised that I came up to her. I said, "JS, we need to talk." As the word talk came out of my mouth, I swung at her face as hard as I could. I knocked her down, and a crowd instantly formed around us. Everyone was telling me to kick her ass, and finally, this girl was known for even beating up the boys at our school. I was far from the only one that hated her. I was straddling her and hitting her, albeit not hard, as my full strength went into that first punch. The assistant principal showed up and pulled me off of her. He yelled, "JS, get in my office," and looked at me and said, "Come on." the whole way up 2 flights of stairs, and across the school she kept yelling, "She hit me first." And I kept yelling back, "Yep, and I'll do it again." They called our parents. Mine were relieved that I had stood up for myself finally. I was given 1 detention for fighting. She was suspended for 2 weeks because it was not her first fight of the year, by far. Because of the 2 weeks she was suspended, she missed finals and prom. Because she missed finals, she failed her senior year. She dropped out and never bothered any of us again. Now, to answer the original question, I ran into her a couple of years later. We were in the grocery store, me alone and her with her 3 kids. She was buying groceries with food stamps. I was home from college on Christmas break. I looked at her, she looked at me, and all I could do was smile. I effectively ruined her life, and we both knew it. Bully 0, me 1. Grew up being the smart kid with a big head, literally. In 5th grade I had to switch to another school because of moving. There was this preppy white girl in my class, named Hallie B anyways. I would always finish my assignments early. For some reason we colored a lot in class. She made me hate 5th grade to the point that I had to transfer to another school. Fast forward to 9th grade and we ended up at the same high school. I was still a huge nerd, and she was a stereotypical cheerleader. She picked up right where she left off. I never did anything because she was in good with the school administration, and it seemed pointless. The summer between 10th and 11th grade she went to the lake and got hammered with her friend. They both got into a car and drove without seat belts. They ended up crashing into another car and killed a mom and her child, while the husband survived. Hallie was ejected 20 feet through the front windshield and died on impact. Everyone at school memorializes her as this kind, caring person who wouldn't hurt a fly, but I never felt anything but relief, and while it might make me a bad person, I'm glad she got hers. I still know people who talk about how they miss her. I've never told anyone aside from a few friends about what a huge beat she was to me. In 5th grade we used to go to our elementary school on the weekends and play ball, run around, kid stuff. There was this kid named Monty that used to show up there from time to time. I remember he had this t-shirt on one time that said "Don't be a dick" on the back of it, and remembered thinking, what dad would let their kid wear that? Obviously he had issues at home, but he was like 2 years older than us, and at age 10 that's a big difference in size and maturity. I remember him just being a total asshole to us, taking our sheet, even ripping my buddy's shell necklace off his neck. At one point, I had a golf driver on my shoulder like a baseball bat and was ready to swing at this kid. We felt terrorized by this jerk. Flash forward to 10 years later, I'm 20 years old and in jail. Totally different story, and not relevant, and in a 2-story room with 100 or so bunks, and probably 150 men in one room. We are all wearing orange jumpsuits, and the entire front of our room is glass, and facing other glass rooms. I look through the glass into the other room and see Monty. I'm the type of person that will never forget a face, and apparently he didn't forget mine. Except, I was 6 feet 3 inches 200 pounds now. Apparently he didn't grow at all since last time I saw him. I looked into his eyes and mouthed, "Do you remember me?" pointing at myself. He nodded, with an obvious fear in his eyes, and made a measuring gesture with his hands, and mouthed, "You are big now." I smiled. He was scared shitless. Locked up in jail, feeling very vulnerable, and find out you're in with a kid you picked on and harassed 10 years earlier that's twice your size now. I kept my fists to myself, but just the fearful look in his eyes when he recognized me, I will never forget. Interviewed him for a job. Middle school bully, let us call him Jack, that took delight in throwing his weight around. He had a lot of it, and beating up / intimidating anyone he could. He stole from local shops and would happily vandalize the local area for a laugh. He ended up in prison after glassing a guy in a pub over some missing drug money. Fast forward 10 years, and I'm on an interview board for a small social enterprise. We are after a van driver to collect and deliver aid equipment. I hadn't been part of the selection process, just helped define the job description and requirements, but sat on the interview panel. This was a social enterprise company that supports people with long-term mental health problems to get back into work by giving them a job and training to help them support themselves. So I want a nice person for this role. Not only are they going to transport valuable equipment, but the company takes it equipment on the understanding that it will ensure that no data is recoverable from the equipment. When we picked it up we had access to a lot of data that is protected by law. So in walks the bully from my childhood, still fat and still full of himself. I recognize him instantly, but he hasn't the foggiest who I'm even after I'm introduced. I admit I'm confused as this job will require a CRB check and this guy history will come up. So I pick up my copy of the application form and see that the name is Jason, not Jack. He then proceeded to go through the whole interview without saying a single thing that I consider true. He came across as believable, but gave a fabrication of a life for that hour. I admit he was good. If I hadn't known him, I would have believed him. He was told that a CRB would be required for the post and he didn't hesitate to say it wouldn't be a problem. By the end of the interview he looked confident and pleased with himself as I walked him back out of the building. He asked if I though he stood a chance and his face crumbled when I said I don't think so, Jack. I have no idea how he thought he would get away with it. From the interview room you could see the pub that he attacked a guy in, and we are not talking about a big city here. I believe people can change and should have a second chance, and I have backed the employment of people with criminal records. But if you lie you haven't changed. I was getting gas at a station I almost never visit. I just happened to be driving by for work and needed to fuel up. As I went in to pay with my company gas card, who was working the counter but the bully. He looked like crap, missing a tooth, dirty, just plain trashy. It was all I could do to not say anything to him. It only got better as I finished paying for my gas and started putting my sunglasses on. His boss started yelling at him for not performing some task properly. It was all I could do to not start laughing in the store still. TLDR, I'm successful and my schoolyard bully works a minimum wage job. Who's got the last laugh now, asshole? Backstory: the kid ruined my high school life, stole from me, keyed my car, my parents' cars, defaced a lot of my personal property, and was just a royal pitter. We were best friends since elementary school, but I guess he wanted to be cool, so he picked on me. When we got to high school, I'd wake up and break into tears because I hated going to high school. Did I mention I'm male and was around 5 minutes and 11 seconds and 200 pounds? After high school, I went on to a great college, one he and his family loved. He never was able to get in or attempted to get in. He just a huge fanboy. Growing up, he and his parents always had aspirations for him to get into this university. Years later, I went to a Walgreens in the neighborhood we both grew up in. He was outside smoking a cigarette with his apron on. I was rocking out my college sweater since it was game day. Anyways, he sees me walking up and puts out his cigarette to greet me and say hello. We exchange a few words and share our lives for a few minutes. He dropped out of community college, is now managing the Walgreens, making good money as a manager, with hopes of moving to Vegas with his girlfriend. I told him I got into the college, finishing my double major, and getting ready to move to Silicon Valley to start my career in technology. Karma was enough for me that day. I never had to retaliate against him. The universe took care of it for me. He added me on Facebook a few weeks later, and since seeing him, he's gained about 50 pounds, balding, living out in the desert with an equally unattractive girlfriend. I was chased in high school for my appearance, mostly just because I was kinda grungy, and I didn't wear makeup, and the girls I went to school with went to the extreme to be perfect every day. I just didn't care, and I didn't really mind being teased. A couple years after grad, I started to do the girl thing with makeup all over my face and form-fitting clothes and heels for days. I was working for a high-end cosmetics store, so of course, part of the dress code is being done up to the nines. Mother's Day rolls around, and this group of 5 guys I come in, looking for gifts, and immediately I recognize them as part of the group that teased me in high school. I still give them stellar service, help them pick out gifts, and they're flirting with me, and I'm just kinda doing my customer service thing and smiling, trying to make a good sale. Well, I'm ringing one of them through the till, and my coworker comes over to ask, "Hey doll revolution, did that new shipment of body scrubs come in?" And it clicks on the guy's face who I am. He looks to his bud, who is still making the eyes at me and kinda nudges him, but he just goes, "Hey man, what?" and does not understand the subliminal panic his friend is trying to get across. I politely hand him his bags and he beelines out of the store, tearing his friends with him. A couple minutes later, the other four rush back over to the front of the door for a good double take. I was pretty satisfied with their reactions. LMAO. Not really a bully, but there was a girl I was good friends with. She was a year older and played the big sister role all through middle school. In high school, my freshman year, we both tried out for the soccer team. I made it, she didn't. Cue the horrible rumors, anger, and pure hatred for me, for years. Like, until she graduated high school. We didn't talk again. A year ago, so like 7 years, after I graduated high school, we reconnected on Facebook somehow. So I have a good job, I'm married, kid, house, dog, and cat, car, etc. She got some type of horrible health problem that has left her crippled, in terrible pain, unable to work. She is having a hard time getting disability and now she's too old to be on her dad's health insurance, so she has none, with all her health issues. She lives with her parents, not a lot of friends around, and oh, she got very fat from medications she has been on. Surprisingly, it doesn't make me feel good to see her like that. Actually, it makes me sad. She's turned into a very bitter person, and she has absolutely zero self-esteem. It's really sad, because she was really interesting and funny before, and even when she was hating me all the time, I still knew she could be a cool person. I try and help her out, give her constructive advice when she asks for it, and be an overall positive influence on her life, but I have a hard time figuring out how to be really nice and helpful when she, justifiably, has a pity party all the time, because the mean years are still in the back of my head. Mine is reverse. I'm the bully, and I got owned. I was in college and there was this girl in a class that I made every effort to get to know. I made sure we were in the same 3-person group for a semester project. No matter what I did, she wanted none of me. She was gorgeous, but come on, she wouldn't even let me drive her to her car across campus on a terribly hot day. I finally asked her what the problem was, and she told me. Back in high school I was pretty mean to the band kids. Nothing physical, just a lot of jokes, relentless jokes. It was funny material, because the whole band thing is funny. Years later there would be American Pie which capitalized on this. Also, the band at my high school was very good. State championship every year good. They were about to kick the ag department out of their building just because they could, and I was exacting revenge on them for their imperialistic endeavors. As you can guess, this girl was one of those band nerds I made fun of relentlessly. I didn't recognize her, because she went from just a random skinny band nerd to extremely hot in the time, since we left high school. I didn't even recognize her until she enlightened me on who she once was. I'm from a very Hispanic community, and she has one of those Jose Ramirez type names that wouldn't tip me off that we went to high school together. As bad as that sounds, it's a real thing, that I went to school with 50 girls named Mariah Lopez. She then went on to say how she really did have a crush on me back in the day and thought I had only gotten better looking with a little age. However, because I was such a dick back then, she'd never give me the satisfaction I sought now. No amount of being sorry would help. I learned my lesson. My god, did I ever learn my lesson. And I'm sure she felt like $1,000,000 getting that revenge on me. I saw the kid who once pulled my chair out from under me in the gym and broke my tailbone, causing me to cry as an 8th grader, top of the class and all that. This of course made it worse, and then laughing with others, one of many occasions, just the most violent. The rest involved demeaning, making fun of my glasses, ganging up, pair games, getting ganged up on by him and others like him, etc. ad infinitum. Anyway, saw him waiting tables at the local Ivers sit down restaurant, good happy hour, and he recognized me. He still looks about the same, good, fit, whatever, but I'm taller, fit and thinner. I grew into myself and take care of myself, whatever. He was a good server and took extra good care of us since we went back and all. Oh yeah, I was with my real good looking lady as well, which helped my ego. At the end of it I thanked him, and on our way out saw him at the front of the restaurant with a couple other D-bags from high school who also worked there, ironically, and covertly homie hand slapped him a $20 tip and kept going. I heard him yell thanks. I grinned and slow walked the fuck out of there with my lady on my arm. Small victory? Yes. Did it feel good? Real good. The next day I drove myself back down to Seattle to work at my awesome music venue job and production manage the whole deal after going to my college classes. This also made me feel pretty good about myself. I used to play on my middle school football team.
But we learn to fire it up.
And I weighed around 100
We in the
pounds.
car with from winning. Go out lies.
The A team, made up of the best players, the B team, the not so good players, and the C team, the bad players. I was put on the C team. And because of that I was made fun of a lot. And the main person who did that was Joe. I severed the A team quarterback after middle school. I left and went to a private school. I grew and I worked very hard at becoming the best I could be. I played varsity football all 4 years of high school, and I was offered a scholarship to play college football for the Fresno State Bulldogs. All of my hard work had paid off. I was the starting running back on the team for 3 years, and I was drafted in the 4th round and played 2 years of NFL football until I blew out my knee and was unable to play again. Although I was devastated, I continued my life and got married and had 3 beautiful children. My family and I always donate large amounts to various charities. One day my wife and I went to help out at the soup kitchen. And guess who was in line for food? No other than Joe. I severed. I couldn't recognize him, but I knew he recognized me. It took me a while, but I finally made the connection. At first I was furious because I remembered all the horrible things he used to do to me. But then I realized that was in the past, and I could tell he felt terrible about what he did to me. I ended up sitting down with him, and we conversed for a while. I let him stay at my house for a while since he was homeless. And after 2 weeks I helped him get a job. He was very thankful, and we are still friends to this day. My bully was the kind that befriends you then destroys you. Elle and I shared this obsessive love for all things film and drama. I studied film at uni, she studied acting, and it was the main reason we became friends. We used to go to the cinema every few days, a place local to both of us that had lax enough security we could sneak into 2 or 3 different screenings in one go if we felt the need. But Elle was genuinely cruel and messed up, almost sociopathic. She undermined my confidence, isolated me from my friends, then turned them against me. To this day I don't know what she told them about me, but it must have been pretty awful and also false, because I was genuinely just boring and / but nice. She made me feel worthless and horrible and incredibly depressed. It took me years to feel better, and the stress manifested in obsessive behaviors, EDS, bouts with depression, suicidal thoughts. I actually really hate to contribute that to her, and she wasn't the sole cause of my issues, but she absolutely made them worse and tipped them from general teen angst into something more dangerous. I'm far happier and more stable now. Anyway, to try and keep it short, I was home from university and hadn't seen her in 2 years. We were there to see The Dark Knight. It had been 3.5 since she was anything but hostile to me. This girl was like the devil. She was truly evil. I recognize she was incredibly messed up and probably very sad, but when you're an isolated teenager that's hard to grasp. She terrified me. The sight of her made me sick with fear. This girl had been so hateful to my face, behind my back. She destroyed me. So when I saw her taking a seat a few rows over from me, I expected to be terrified, but all I could think was how her hair looked crap. I said, "Oh, it's Elle," out of sheer surprise, and as she looked up and recognized me, I burst out laughing. It was the fact she didn't scare me. I just cracked up. I couldn't help it. She just shit herself. She looked so shocked and, if anything, afraid. She could barely look me in the eye. She literally ran out of the theater and only sneaked back in once the film had started, and even then she pointedly avoiding looking at me and spent most of the film glancing over. I'm told I was by that point focused entirely on the Redditors film. After the film, we passed her and her parents as we walked out. She froze and just stared at her dad so as not to look at me, even though I said hi to her parents as we passed, and they really nicely said it back. She was absolutely terrified of me. Maybe that I'd say something, maybe that I'd out her as a bully, I don't know. I haven't seen her since, nor have I spoken to her. I don't plan to. She was a twisted person, and hopefully sought help for her problems, and found some kind of happiness. As an adult I can realize she offered nothing as a friend. She wasn't supportive, she couldn't be trusted, and she was actively abusive. And she's afraid of me. It might sound sad to some, but I won. It won't matter what successes she might earn, because she runs at the sight of me. A few years back I was the assistant manager at my karate studio. It was a slow quiet day when in walked Paul, my old bully from public school. I wasn't sure at first, it had been a long time, and it was hard to tell. I didn't say anything. Paul was interested in joining the dojo, and I showed him around, discussed pricing, etc. I didn't treat him any differently than I would any other potential client. At the end of the tour, Paul decided to join our dojo. We sat down in the office and he filled out the paperwork. When he wrote his name out on the application, I knew for sure that this was, indeed, my old bully. The guy who used to torment me every single weekday. Who made me kneel in dog shit. I still didn't say anything until after prepaid me for an entire year's membership. As I walked him to the door, I smiled. I'm really looking forward to training with you. I smiled. Thanks, me too, Paul said. You don't recognize me, do you? No, should I? Yes. We went to school together, grade 3 through 8. You bullied me every day and made my life miserable. Can't wait to see you in class. Paul went white and walked out without another word and never walked back in. He willingly threw away a year's membership payment, almost $500, rather than have to be in the same class with me. Back in middle school, I lived in the old money part of town, except my parents weren't old money. In fact, they pretty much had no money. The only reason we lived where we lived was because my mom had inherited the house we lived in. My parents had no money for things like designer clothes, braces, nor dandruff shampoo. This comes into play. There was this girl, pretty much the queen of our middle school, who fit every stereotype: tall, blonde, hot, and a complete beach. FYI, I'm a guy. She would harass me constantly about my appearance. Why are your teeth so crooked? Can't your parents afford braces? Nice Kmart shirt. Can your parents not afford to feed you? I was very skinny throughout middle and high school. Ooh, dandruff. It's called Selsun Blue. She called me that for years. Fast forward 10 years. I left home, went to college at fairly prestigious state university, had a job, a car, and had even managed to put on some muscle by working out at my university's fitness center. I was dressing better, looked better, and was no longer the skinny dork with dandruff. On a weekend trip back home, a few friends of mine and I went out drinking and hit up a strip club. There on the stage was middle school Beach. She did not look well, to say the least. Turns out she got caught up with the wrong crowd after high school, dropped out of the community college, got cut off from her parents, had a kid, and had pretty much fallen from grace. My friends told me all this and we left, without me getting a glimmer of recognition from middle school Beach. There was this boy who used to pick on me in elementary and high school. He was chubby and mean, grew up to be a cop. I went to college in Orlando and worked at Universal Studios at Fear Factor. Who comes through casting for the show? This douche and his dad. I pulled my coworkers aside and told them who he was. He and his dad got cast in the show. The first round was hanging from a slanted bar above the stage. The first and second people to drop were out. The stunt crew let this kid hold more of his weight than they normally did until he started slipping. Then they held him up. He and his dad make it through to the second round. This round was a team round, with one partner throwing dead octopi while being on a harness, swinging through the air. The second person is on the ground, trying to catch them. Stunt crew made sure that he was swinging just a little rougher than normal. He and his dad make it to the final. The finale was this guy against his dad. The stunt crew made it impossible for him to win, holding his harness at inopportune times, making sure that he was constantly at a disadvantage. His dad beat him and made him look like such a fool. He barely made it through the first part by the time his dad finished the challenge. It was great. TLDR, I foretold the future for my bully. I had a rough time in middle school. Hormones, puberty, social hierarchies and beachy girls. Most of my elementary school friends went to a different middle school, so I didn't know too many people at my relatively more affluent school. I am a very shy and quiet person, so making friends was hard. Once I did make friends, was extremely loyal to them. It took some time, but I made some fellow nerdy, shy friends and things became generally okay. There was this one popular girl who did go out of her way to bully me in the 6th and 7th grades. I was a tiny Asian girl, 4 feet something, and no more than 65 pounds, and this girl was a giant ginger, 5 something and stocky/thick. I have no idea why, but she chose to pick on me. We had all of our classes together, and she'd always make really mean and snarky remarks about the way I looked, my glasses, my clothes, etc. She'd steal or smash my lunch, scrunch up papers handed back to me, just generally annoying shit. I think she wanted to make me cry, but I never did. I just soaked it up and generally ignored and avoided that beach. Eventually, she got tired of making fun of me by the end of the 6th grade. Unfortunately, she decided to start targeting one of my really good friends. She's still one of my besties to this day. My friend is the kindest, sweetest, shyest person ever. One day, she shoved my friend and said some horrible things to her to make her cry. At lunch, she spots me playing poison or horse on the basketball court with some other friends and decides to bully me and take my personal basketball away. This was the day I grew a backbone. I snapped. I completely snapped. I could personally take her bullying, but there was no way I'd stand for this beach bullying my sweet friend. I threw the ball in her face and just verbally ripped her a new one. I screamed that there was no way she'd amount to anything, so long as I was in her class, because she'd never get an A if I was around, and she was too damn stupid to get anywhere. She'd be a loser forever, never go to college, and just fail at life. I went on and on and on until I was red in the face and literally screamed at her for about 5 minutes straight. I made that beach cry. 12-year-old me also demolished her popular status because some scrawny Asian girl made her look really stupid. The popular kids were getting tired of her shit anyway. Eventually, she moved to another city for high school and I kind of forgot about her. I look back and think that was a big deal for my own development, though I was ashamed about what I said to her because it was cruel. Anyway, 10 years later, and Facebook is starting to take steam. My sweet friend and I were just goofing around seeing who from middle and high school we could look up. We went through our middle school yearbook and I saw Beach Bully's name. Found her FB, Friendster, and Liverjournal/Zanga/something. She got knocked up in high school, dropped out, started abusing all sorts of drugs, worked a minimum wage job, baby daddy drama, etc. I felt really bad for her. I also now feel horrible about saying such nasty things to her when we were 12. I'm the bully sadly in this case. It was only in elementary, which I know does not make it any better, but through middle school and high school I generally would stop bullies. Anyway, in elementary school I would pick on this kid a lot. He never did anything to deserve it at all. Before, during and after I picked on this kid just because. I don't know what happened to him after 6th grade because he didn't attend my middle or high school. It was my 21st birthday. I was just put on probation for underage drinking a week before my 21st, so I spent the day by myself. I went to the mall with the B-Day money I got and decided to spend it all on an authentic signed Stevism and Red Wings jersey. As I was leaving the mall, my mom called and said she was at the town's fair with my niece and nephews. Since I can't go out and drink, I decided to head that way. While walking around the fairgrounds with my nephews and niece, I seen the kid I used to bully constantly walking with his girlfriend. He looked exactly the same. I walked up to him and said hi. He was very standoffish and quietly nervous. I asked how he's been, and he just said, fine. He didn't even want to make eye contact with me, and I felt terrible. There were awkward seconds between our words, and finally I asked him if he liked the Red Wings. He said, yay. And I then handed him the bag that contained my signed Ism and jersey. He said, what's this? And I said, yours. and walked away. Haven't seen him since, but I hope he knows I'm sorry. During my freshman year of high school I was constantly bullied and picked on for being small. I was a late bloomer and literally thrown in trash can for that entire year. One guy in particular was the ringleader of my torment. We'll call him Bill, fake name. He took my money, knocked my books down every chance he got. On my birthday he and 8 other guys jumped me in the locker room before pep. It got so bad I moved to a different city. Time goes on, I grew up physically and mentally. After high school I moved back to the city where I was bullied because I got a great job opportunity, awesome pay, couldn't say no. I met up with one of my only friends back then, and that's where I seen Bill at the mall. He worked at McDonald's in the food court and he was on lunch break. I was assuming this because he had the McDonald's shirt on, sitting there alone, so skinny that he looked like an African that one would sponsor. Turns out that he couldn't keep a job for more than a month because he has a drug addiction. I didn't say anything to him. I just passed by and that was that. Weeks later I seen him again at a friend's party and we talked for about 7 minutes until he tried to force me to give him my hard-earned money. When I refused he swung at me. Side note, after I moved my sophomore year I took Muay Thai classes for 3 years and was an average but still very skilled fighter. It led to me breaking his arm while I had him in an armbar. He pressed charges for assault, but I got off on self-defense. I haven't seen him since. In junior high there was a complete bully kid who was simply hateful and mean-spirited. His folks were wealthy and he was really handsome. I kept away from him because I was pretty much just trying to get through school and didn't need the grief. He was on par with a kid from Karate Kid. He was a real faker. In high school his dad kills himself in their garage. Everyone knows. He kind of lays low and we all graduate. A few years later at our state college I see him at the bar. He smiles really big and I walk over. I sat with him for about 10 minutes and just shot the sheet. He was so different and nice. I half wanted to tell him how much of a dick he was in school, but I thought that would be a bit cheaty. A year or so later at a different bar I find myself sitting near some girls from the same schools. One was in my physics class. She was one of the angriest girls I had known. She was so faking cute though, and I secretly thought she was hot as hell. A cheerleader and small like a pixie. At the bar her friend gets up to go to the bathroom and she turns to me. I asked if she went to Central High and she started laughing. She said she thought it was me and I waited for the angry girl to emerge. I waited. Still waiting. I move over a couple seats and we start talking. Her friend returns and decides to leave us alone. I told her that I had always thought she was so hot, and I took a deep breath. So mean. I was waiting for a really defensive barb. Nothing. She looked down and said had been going through a lot of terrible shit back then. I didn't press it and we drank for a little bit. She insists on driving me to my apartment, only a few blocks away. We have to walk to her apartment which is also a few blocks away. She drives me home and we sit in the car outside my place, waiting. I look her in the eyes and ask her if she wants to come. She said no. We start making out and I get to open her shirt and start sucking on her tigs. We make out for a while and I know she isn't coming into the apartment. So we do the parting ways thing and I walk inside with this raging boner. Never see her again.